London, England, home to everyone who is anyone, from Paddington Bear to the Queen. This great capital has stood at the forefront of industry and culture for a millennia. Best known for our dry wit and wet weather, it is really the people and history of London that make this city so great. We're bringing you a comprehensive guide of all things to see and do in London. From food and drink to unique local attractions, follow us on a journey through this capital steeped in history and discover the hidden wonders of this magnificent city. This is Discover London.
Hello, I'm Olivia Cox.
And I'm Derek O'Reilly. And together we're going to take you on a tour of London.
In today's episode, we'll be looking at the exciting and beautiful areas of Clerkenwell and Smithfield, located in the London borough of Islington. It's an area with a charming backstory.
Clerkenwell area is fantastic because
it's not like Covent Garden Piazza.
So it's quite unique.
This area is becoming a good area.
We are delighted to say
You're watching
love
London. Ta-da!
Now, Olivia, I've been a London cab driver for 20 years. And along the way, you meet some really interesting characters. I'm going to introduce you to an old friend of mine who will tell us some fantastic stories about the history of Clerkenwell and Smithfield.
In true British fashion, we had a slight downpour of rain, but that didn't stop us. We stopped outside Farringdon Station, where Derek introduced me to his friend Rob Smith, who is a local tour guide.
Could you tell us a little bit about the history of Clerkenwell and the significance of this district in relation to London as a general?
Well, Clerkenwell is a really fascinating place. It's really the original London suburb. As medieval London was growing, it started to expand outside its city walls, and the first place it expanded was Clerkenwell. The Clerkenwell comes from an actual well called the Clerk's Well, and believe it or not, that's still here today. Water supply was really important, obviously, for any city, but even in the Middle Ages, you weren't really wanting to drink water out of the Thames, so fresh water was really important. And luckily, Clerkenwell had a really good supply of fresh water. So the Clerk's Well gets its name because it was looked after by the clerks of the city churches. Now, they were administrative people, and they also had another job of leading the singing in the church. And while people were queuing for the water, there'd often be a bit of a social occasion. And it's not long before you hear of plays being put on at the Clerk's Well. So the entertainment carries on throughout Clerkenwell's history. Smithfield was a really bloody history where there have been lots of executions and there were jousting and fights took place. But one of the things they had was a traditional fair, and at the fair, cattle would be sold, and this gradually meant that Smithfield was the place where meat was traded in London. And still, you can go and see the Smithfield Market today. Now, go and see Smithfield Market is a really fantastic thing to do. It's a lovely Victorian building at the moment with fantastic coloured wrought iron, which you really must go and see. But if you're a meat lover, the thing I really recommend is go and have a good Smithfield breakfast. The pubs in Smithfield always traditionally opened up very early in the morning so that people who are working in the meat market could go and get a breakfast and a drink. And you can still do that today and have a very hearty meat-filled breakfast, fresh from the market. You can swell it all down with a pint of Guinness.
Sounds good to me,
So
Olivia.
what kind of time are we talking? Can we go?
Yes, the place called The Hope opens up at 7 o'clock in the morning. One of the
7?
pubs.
For
Fantastic.
breakfast and beer?
That's right, yes.
So I bet you actually get a lot more people who haven't been to sleep rather than people who
Well,
are
I think it
coming
was
in
also
first thing.
very popular with clubbers as well.
So the building we are now outside, could you give us a brief history of that building?
Yes, this was built in the late 1700s, and it was the school set up for children of Welsh families who'd come to London and needed an education while their fathers were selling the cattle. And then later on, it's taken over by Russian revolutionaries. They publish the magazine Iskra here. All the revolutionaries are on the run from places like Russia and Germany. And the most famous of them is the Russian revolutionary Lenin, who worked in this building. He was working on the magazine Iskra. Later on, it becomes a building called the Marx Memorial Library, and it's a place where documents for things like the Spanish Civil War are kept and things to do with trade union history. So it's got an incredible collection of documents all from the 20th century, which you can go and visit. London was seen as a sort of particularly great place to live, a land of great opportunity. But when you get here, you find you can only really afford to live in the cheapest possible place.
Sounds a bit like today.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's a situation I'm quite familiar with.
Absolutely.
Well, Clerkenwell had the place with the cheapest possible accommodation, a street with the worst reputation in all London, a street called Saffron Hill. To give you an idea, when Charles Dickens writes Oliver Twist, the place he bases Fagin's Den in is Saffron Hill.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right.
So at that time, Saffron Hill, the people who lived there, Londoners, were starting to move out, but they would let their houses to Italians. Life was really hard in Italy at that time. They'd had the Napoleonic Wars. By the 1850s, though, the Italian community started to build up and get a lot more respectable. And they managed to build themselves an absolutely beautiful church, St. Peter's Italian Church, which is still in Clerkenwell Road. And it's one of the most beautiful churches in London. Now, the trouble was they had people moving to Clerkenwell from all over Italy. And they didn't want to dedicate it to one particular saint and upset everyone else. So each alcove in the church is dedicated to a particular Italian saint from a different area of Italy.
So inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely.
The church was built for the growing number of Italian immigrants in the 19th century and is equipped with one of the largest bells in England, which is known as the Steel Monster. The frontal section of the church consists of twin arches, above which are 3 alcoves. The central alcove contains a statue of Christ, with statues of St Bede and St George on either side. Directly next door is the oldest Italian delicatessen in London, and it is still kept its Italian heritage.
My name is Felice, and we are at Teroni's of Clerkenwell. I used to be an employee, and the business was sold and was retaken from the ex-owners, and they proposed me if I'm interested, and this I came in. This is established in 1878, and this is the oldest Italian deli in London. And this is like an old institution. It's very important for the Italian community, also from the area. It's going because we did combine the food and the shop and the deli, so it's working well. And mainly because it's very close to the Italian church, which is next to us. They used to call this area Little Italy, which was all lived by Italians. This area is becoming a good area, and it's changing a lot for the better. The type of customer we have different. During the week is office workers around this area. They come for mainly Italian deli, but we do sell paninis, pasta, coffees, wines, a mix of food and drinks. It's all imported from Italy, so it's only Italian food in this shop. Regulars come mainly weekends in here. Like Italians, they can park and they can avoid the congestion charge.
Olivia, London has a wealth of places to eat and drink. Sometimes it can be really difficult to navigate yourself around the choices that are available.
Yeah, but Derek, you must know London like the back of your hand, so hit me with some recommendations. Where can I get a good evening meal in Clerkenwell and Smithfield?
I have 2 gentlemen who have the perfect answer to your question.
Right, well, good morning. I'm Fergus Henderson, chef and one of the directors of St John.
I'm Trevor Gulliver, the other half of here, and welcome. You're sitting in the bar, and behind is our first bakery. Behind you can hear noises coming from the kitchen and the restaurant.
Taylor found it and showed it to me in one look. I was smitten. These are all chimneys, old smoked bacon smokehouses.
This last smoked in 1967, and I have to tell you that our logo, that famous pig, didn't have any reference to the original because these chimneys there's 6 of them. Some are separated, but they smoked all day long, and they smoked pig. The guy came in one day and was looking curiously There is some kind of strange way that he said that it's very good that after all this time, that it's now is a restaurant, that it seems to have found its natural, where it should end up, quite happily. The roast bone marrow, I guess I hate that phrase, would be our signature dish. Much written about, which is nice. It's quite a lovely dynamic situation because nature writes our menu. The world is so homogenised and menus don't change, and therefore it can be quantified, distributed, whatever it is, maybe de-skilled. So to work in a kitchen in that environment is fantastic for chefs, for people learning, exciting for front of house, and hopefully for our customers. We don't believe in, is it called table turning, which sometimes sounds like churning. We are delighted when people come, and when they come back again is excellent, double good.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
Ooh, let's go. Thanks, Derek. Dans le noir. Isn't that French for in the dark?
Yes, Olivia, this restaurant has a unique concept.
How do you mean? Just eat in the dark?
Oui.
My name is Dominic Racklin. I am the general manager of Dans le Noir here in London. Dans le Noir means in the dark. There's a question mark because at the end of this experience, all the people get some answer about the question they ask themselves. What is the darkness? What is to be blind? What I'm eating? Who is sitting nearby me? All these questions, they have an answer at the end of this unique experience. Dans le Noir, it is based on three concepts. A personal experience. You have to know that 80% of the information we get to your brain passes through your eyes. And we close the curtain. Touching, tasting, smelling, all these senses are revealed. This is a personal experience. The second concept is the social experience. You don't know who's sitting nearby you because we don't have any single table. It means that communication comes back and there's no prejudgments on this society. Everybody is the same in the dark. And the third concept, this empathy, means that you are going to be guided by a blind person. You can help them to cross the street because they are lost outside. They are going to help you to have this unique experience because you are lost inside. So this restaurant is based only on booking. It's not an open door restaurant. So we know how many people are coming and we welcome them in this floor, the welcoming area. And we ask them to put all source of light in one of the lockers. You are going to guess what you are going to eat because we propose 4 different surprise menus. And at the end, we show you by pictures and text what you have eaten, and it's a big surprise for people. 50% of the employees engaged here in Dans le Noir, London, are disabled. They are partially blind or fully blind. In the kitchen, this is one of the most common questions. No, the chef is not blind, and there's light in the toilets.
Dans le Noir is situated in Clerkenwell Green, which is a short walk from Farringdon Station and a few hundred yards from the city.
Now, if you're looking for a place to stay in the Clerkenwell and Smithfield area, you've picked a place right in the heart of the city.
Hotels in the area are reasonably priced, plus some of them still look and feel traditionally British.
My name is Stefania Ban, and I'm the hotel reservation manager at the Clerkenwell. It used to be called the Duke of York. So on the ground floor, we have obviously the pub with the long bar, and then we have the boutique hotel. So we have 6 rooms upstairs. Each room has a different color theme. So I think everybody has a different sort of vision and different take on the on the rooms. There's a dog theme across the whole building. The owners are dog lovers, and it kind of became a sort of a talking point. They all asked me where we got the artwork from. The building was founded in 1899, so you get the comfort, you get all the technology you need, but it kind of has like a bit of history. We seem to be very popular amongst sort of all the Americans. One of the things they all comment about, it's obviously about that it's got this English, so English feel to it. I worked in most areas in London, and I never heard of the Clerkenwell, and I was pleasantly surprised. It's so quirky. I like the fact that you don't get the same coffee shops, the same sort of clothing shop, but you've got Leather Lane Market just across the street where you can find all these different sort of food pop up, which is really interesting. So it's quite unique, and I just I really like that kind of character.
You'll find the Clerkenwell on Clerkenwell Road. It is located a short walk away from the Church of St Peter's. Now, if you love jewellery, then you're in luck, as the area has a famous street that is known as the centre of the UK diamond trade. This world-renowned street is called Hatton Garden. As the name suggests, the area was once a famous garden, which was then used to create a estate of streets and houses in the 17th century. Its original name came from Sir Christopher Hatton, a former resident who became Lord Chancellor of England in 1587. Hatton Garden became internationally known as London's jewellery quarter during the diamond rush in the 1870s. Today, the area comprises of nearly 300 local businesses with over 50 shops, and is the place to buy handmade jewellery of both traditional and contemporary designs. If you squeeze down a narrow alleyway off Hatton Garden, you will come across Ely Court, home to Ye Old Mitre pub, which was originally established in 1546. It serves local ales, great food, and is famous for having a cherry tree which Queen Elizabeth I was said to have danced around. Smithfield's importance to London was cemented by the construction of the Holborn Viaduct. Built between 1863 and 1869, it was a costly but outstanding feat of Victorian engineering. It was the world's first flyover and was designed to improve access to Smithfield Market and the surrounding area from central London. Smithfield is also home to St Bartholomew's Hospital, one of the oldest hospitals in Europe. Originally built in 1123 for the poor of Smithfield by a former courtier of King Henry I, it was refounded by King Henry VIII in 1546 after encountering financial troubles. As such, the entrance is home to the only statue of Henry VIII in London. Today, St Bart's as it's known, is a leading internationally renowned teaching hospital. The area also has a somewhat darker side. The Elms at Smithfield was used as an execution site with a range of gruesome methods, including hangings, beheadings and burning at the stake. On one of the hospital walls is a memorial to Sir William Wallace, a Scottish patriot who fought a war of independence against the English crown. After being captured in Scotland in 1305, he was transported to London, found guilty of treason, before succumbing to a gory death at this site later that year. After being tortured, his body was quartered, and each piece was sent to 4 different locations in Britain to serve as a warning to potential future rebels.
Now, Olivia, we're going to visit the Museum of the Order of St John. We're going to meet curator Tom Folkes, and we're going to have our own guided tour.
Sounds ideal. Hi Tom, nice to meet you.
Pleasure. We're now standing in the Order Gallery, which tells the story of the Order of St John from its foundation in the 11th century through its slow retreat westwards across the Mediterranean until the invasion of Napoleon into Malta in 1798 when they departed. So all the objects in this gallery relate to that period in history.
I'm looking at the cannon there.
Yes.
It looks interesting.
This cannon was given by King Henry VIII to the Order of St John. It was taken by the Order to fight against the Ottoman Turks. Eventually they lost it to the Ottoman Turks, who then took this cannon for their own fights. It was lost off the coast of Cyprus. This was under the sea for 300 years, and then in 1908, dredging brought this cannon up, and then in 1974, when Cyprus was granted independence, this cannon travelled back to London, and it was presented back to the Order of St John's.
That suit of armour, are you telling me that somebody actually wore that in the heat of Rhodes?
They did indeed, yes. I don't think it would have been very pleasant being a Knight of St John. But yeah, 30-degree heat. And that chainmail, it's incredibly heavy. It's incredibly difficult to lift up. People went very young, they would have travelled on the galleys, they would have learnt their trade, and certainly by the time they were teenagers, they'd probably be fighting. You had to prove appropriate aristocratic birth and lineage to be able to join the Order of St John. You'd have to go 7 generations back, your appropriate blue blood, and you would bring a proof of nobility with you. If you didn't have that appropriate noble birth, then generally you wouldn't be accepted, although certain exceptions were made if there was exceptional talent.
Okay, yeah.
There is a rather spectacular painting that we have on display in another gallery by Caravaggio. Caravaggio was made a Knight of St John. He didn't have that noble birth, but he could paint a nice picture. So I think people are often quite dumbfounded that it's here on display. This is a portrait bust of Grand Master Jean de la Valette, who was the victor at the Siege of Malta in 1565. He was an incredibly ruthless and strategic leader of his forces, and following the Great Siege, his victory was celebrated throughout Europe, and this bust was made as a diplomatic gift to be given to him following his victory. It's a relatively recent addition to the collection, but a spectacular thing for us to have on display. This is the chapter hall. This was constructed in 1903 as an extension to the 1504 St John's Gate, where meetings of chapter, the governing body of the Order of St John, take place.
Wow.
It still functions in the same way today.
And the heraldry round the...
These are all the English priors of the Order, so the head of the Order in England from its foundation in the mid-12th century right through to the present day, just over here. And the current Grand Prior of the Order in England is Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the Queen's cousin, whose sculpture is downstairs on display. We are standing in the Priory Church of the Order of St John. This is the remains of the original church that was built here in the 12th century. Today, this building functions essentially as a private chapel for the Order of St John, so order ceremonies and services are held here. This is the crypt. This is really the star of the museum's buildings.
And is this room open to the public in general?
It's open on guided tours, so we have guided tours on Tuesdays, Fridays and Saturdays at 11 and 6:30. People can just turn up and come for a wander around the buildings with a very experienced and knowledgeable guide.
London, England, home to everyone who is anyone, from Paddington Bear to the Queen. This great capital has stood at the forefront of industry and culture for a millennia. Best known for our dry wit and wet weather, it is really the people and history of London that make this city so great. We're bringing you a comprehensive guide of all things to see and do in London. From food and drink to unique local attractions, follow us on a journey through this capital steeped in history and discover the hidden wonders of this magnificent city. This is Discover London.
I'm Olivia Cox.
And I'm Derek O'Reilly. And together we're going to take you on a tour of London. Today we are visiting Covent Garden, an area well known for its street performers, restaurants and bars, as well as its many theatres and independent shops.
Hey, Derek.
For our first stop, we're off to meet David Charnick, who is going to tell us all about the history of the theatres within Covent Garden.
Let's talk about where we actually are now, the Royal Opera House.
The present building dates from 1858 and it's the third largest auditorium in London. It can accommodate 2,256 people. It's a dedicated opera house, as the name suggests, but also a large repertoire of ballet performances go on here too. Not far from here on the Strand, you have the Savoy Theatre, which was actually constructed before the Savoy Hotel. It was created to promote British performance, particularly operetta, you know, the light form of opera.
There's quite a few plays in the West End that have been going a long time. Which is the longest running?
Well, you're talking about Agatha Christie's play The Mousetrap, which is on at the St Martin's Theatre. That's been going since the 1950s, so it's about 63 years now. It will be the longest running play ever, as long as it carries on running, because of course nothing can overtake it until such time as they stop. Nearby, there is on Cranbourne Street a memorial to Agatha Christie, which was opened on the 60th anniversary of the opening of The Mousetrap. Possibly the most famous person to perform at Covent Garden was a man called Joseph Grimaldi. We remember Grimaldi as the man who created the Joey, the white-faced clown. He was the first person to whiten his face and then pick out the details with makeup. Now, Grimaldi was famous for the Christmas pantomime at Drury Lane, and they didn't have one here, but they actually created a tradition of Christmas pantomime to lure him here, which shows what a draw he actually was, you know.
One of the things as a taxi driver I drop off many times, as you can imagine, at these theatres, I'm always intrigued as to how some of them got their names.
Well, the Garrick is associated with Davy Garrick, who was an 18th century actor. He was a pioneer of a more naturalistic style of acting. He became exceedingly famous, and as a result of that, he's become associated with the theatre. Probably the most intriguing name is the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, which isn't in Drury Lane.
No, I understand that, yeah.
Yeah. It started as the Theatre Royal Bridges Street, the very first theatre on that site in 1663, which faced the way the modern theatre does onto Catherine Street. It was only there till about 1672 when it was decided a new, bigger theatre should be built. So they built a new one, and they turned it round, so it faced Drury Lane. The current building is the fourth building on the site, dates from 1812, and it's the first one to reintroduce the original orientation. But by that time, the name Theatre Royal Drury Lane was so well known, they thought, well, why bother changing it back?
A short walk from the Opera House is the London Film Museum, which currently has an exhibition of all things 007.
My name is Jonathan Sands and I'm founder and chief executive of the London Film Museum. Well, the museum started in 2008 and it originally started as a broad-based celebration of film and a celebration of the talent within the film industries. Bond in Motion exhibition is the largest official collection of original James Bond vehicles, and it celebrates over 50 years now of James Bond, and it presents all the original vehicles and artefacts from the Eon archives, Eon being the production company that produced the James Bond films. There's various different iconic pieces, from the Wet Nelly Underwater Lotus to Goldfinger's original Rolls-Royce Phantom 3, which is on display. We have the fabulous Silver Cloud from A View to a Kill, which obviously Zoran pushes into the lake with Tibbet inside. This was originally Cubby Broccoli's personal car that he lent to the production, hence the fact that there's Cub 1 number plate on it.
Have you driven any?
I might have done to get them in here.
Perk of the job. How do you choose which vehicles are here? Because presumably there's more than one in each film.
First of all, there's availability, so not everything was kept from when the film was made. But you know, the key element is that every film is represented, and we then build upon that layers and layers of items, such as the storyboard from that particular vehicle, or the costume that Bond or the villain would use in that particular scene.
Can I push you into a corner and ask you your favourite Bond?
I knew that question was coming. Well, because I grew up on Roger Moore, I've got to say Roger Moore. Although I love everything Bond, but Roger Moore specifically because it was so instrumental in my growing up. When that Lotus went into the water was almost life-changing. To see that a car can do that and change, you know, that's something that sort of opens your mind up. So, yeah, I would say Roger Moore.
Do you have anything really unusual here that we might not have noticed?
There are smaller items that are on display that are absolutely fascinating. One such exhibit is the miniature DB5, third scale DB5 from Skyfall. Because a lot of the special effects in Bond are still created with what's known as practical effects, which is physical objects rather than computer-generated graphics. They create miniatures and they create miniature sets of things to create the effect. So the third scale DB5 is absolutely scaled perfect. That's on display, and they obviously blow that up rather than an actual size, you know, vehicle.
How long will this exhibition be here?
Well, at the moment, Bond in Motion is open indefinitely. As long as people keep coming and they keep enjoying it, we'll keep it running.
We are now off at a more relaxed pace to the National Portrait Gallery.
The history of the National Portrait Gallery starts in 1840s when it was suggested by one of the trustees, Earl Stanhope, that there should be a National Portrait Gallery, and it was raised in Parliament and it was given consent by Queen Victoria and it was founded in 1856. In 1969, the history of the National Portrait Gallery had a very big milestone. Unless you were the reigning monarch, you had to be dead. Sir Roy Strong changed those rules and said, why don't we have people on the walls who are alive today? And so what you saw in that time was a much wider range of people, and that policy continues to this day. The National Portrait Gallery continues to acquire portraits, and it also commissions portraits. Recently we've had portraits painted of Dame Maggie Smith, the actress, Gail Rebuck, the publisher, and Dame Sally Davis, the Chief Medical Officer, which gives you an idea of the range of people that the gallery collects to put on its walls. On display in the National Portrait Gallery are about 10% of the gallery's collection, which is absolutely huge. So we obviously don't have the room to display everything. So what's great about that is that there's always new things for people to see. And then if people want to see portraits that aren't on the walls, then of course the website has the great majority of them. And also lots of our exhibitions, lots of our portraits tour Britain and tour internationally. Very recently we had an exchange programme with Moscow. We had an exhibition called Russia and the Arts. The interest in Russian-related things at the moment is vast. And we had an exhibition of portraits from the Tretyakov Gallery, 23 of their major portraits of people like Tolstoy and Tchaikovsky. And then in return, we sent a few of our portraits, which the Tretyakov visitors could see, such as Shakespeare and Dickens. So there's a lot of cooperation of loans of portraits between different countries. We have the BP Portrait Award, which is the biggest portrait painting competition in the world, and thousands and thousands of people enter it, and 55 of the top portraits go into an exhibition which can be seen for free. So that's one of the main exhibitions that are bringing visitors to the National Portrait Gallery this summer. The portraits here at the National Portrait Gallery surprise a lot of people. In the room that we're in here now, we probably fulfil the view that a lot of people might have who've not come in here, that the portraits are of people looking rather important with wigs. But there's much more to it in this gallery than that. Anything that is a portrait, the gallery is interested in collecting. So that could be a photograph, it could be a sculpture, it could be a video installation, it could be something on a computer loop, it could be an artist's head made of his own frozen blood. If it's a portrait, we're interested in collecting it.
This Grade 1 building, situated in the heart of London, was once the home to one of the founding fathers of the United States, Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin arrived at 36 Craven Street in July of 1757. The house is located between the River Thames and the Strand, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why Franklin chose the house was because it is equidistant between the City of London, the financial centre, and the City of Westminster, where Parliament is the seat of power.
The house is the world's only remaining Benjamin Franklin home.
Benjamin Franklin had a strong interest in politics and also in science. As a scientist, he was pursuing scientific inventions here in the house that had interested him over a long period, including electricity. Probably his most famous discovery is that lightning is an electrical phenomenon. He said that he went out into a thunderstorm with his son, he took his kite, he attached a key to a string, and he drew the lightning from the sky down to the key, and that was how he determined that lightning was an electrical phenomenon. It wasn't just the will of God. This house served as the first de facto American embassy. Anyone who was anyone calling in from the colonies came to pay their respects to Franklin, and his main mission was to try and find a third way between the interests of the colony and the interests of the crown. So in a sense, Franklin was chief lobbyist for the colonies. He didn't have any formal role in Parliament, although he did have a formal position on behalf of the Crown as postmaster for the colonies. So he had to try and convince and win over without any formal powers.
The theme of entertainment within Covent Garden is carried on at Davenport's Magic Shop, and it attracts visitors from all over the world.
This is a really old trick. It's called the linking rings. My name's Bill Davenport, and I'm the manager of Davenport's Magic Shop. Take two of them till they're solid. I give them a rub, and we find that these two rings very slowly just melt together. It's been in the family since 1898. It was started all those years ago by my great-grandfather, Lewis Davenport, and he was actually a performer on what we call the music halls, the vaudeville at the time. We are really hidden away. We're actually tucked away in the Charing Cross underground shopping arcade. We're actually under street level. We're close to Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus, the Embankment, so we're very, very central London, but we are underground next to Charing Cross Tube Station. Sort of seen just about every magician that has been in London has always popped in. All those years ago, we had people like Tommy Cooper, he was a great customer of ours, David Nixon, and some of the modern magicians. I mean, there was Dynamo and Troy pop in, and also we're great friends of Paul Daniels. We've worked with him on a number of different projects. I quite like card tricks. I also like some of the classics of magic, like the linking rings, rope tricks. But it's often magicians say it's not really what you do, it's the way you do it. Right. So I think different people can take a certain prop and twist it to match their own personality, which is, I think, the great thing about magic. Magic is a great leveller. I mean, we get people all different backgrounds, all different ages, from very young children to people who are, in the sort of later stages of their lives, And what we try and do is we try to understand whether the person's done any magic before. If they're a beginner, then what we try and do is explain some of the simple things which they can do almost straight away. So we try and match the person to the actual trick.
Presumably magic is an international art.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really international, and we get people from literally everywhere. And people pop in and they say, I've been dying to see you since I've been a kid, So we are a centre for people who do magic. As far as Davenport is concerned, well, my son is very artistic. He loves music, he loves magic. Maybe one day he might carry on, yeah.
The area is famous for its street performers and theatres, so it's only natural that the church at the centre, St Paul's, is also known as the Actors' Church.
I've actually been a priest for 25 years. My name's Simon Grigg, and for the last 10 years I've had the great privilege of being rector here at St Paul's, and I've long-standing interest in the theatre. In fact, I was a child actor, and so it was something that I really, really wanted to do, and I was lucky enough to come and be here. So it's wonderful. It's kind of dream come true for me, really. The church was actually built in 1631. The 4th Duke of Bedford, who laid out what is now the piazza in Covent Garden, realised he would need a church. So he commissioned Inigo Jones, who was an architect but also a stage designer, to build a church. But he didn't particularly want to spend a lot of money, so he said, in fact, I wouldn't have it much better than a barn. And so Inigo Jones says, then you will have the handsomest barn in England. So here it is, the handsomest barn in England. The designation of it as the Actors' Church really goes back to the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. And Charles II licensed 2 theatres. They were known as the patent theatres. Those patent theatres moved the focus of theatre, which had been, of course, down on the South Bank in the Elizabethan, Jacobean period, but that moved to the West End because those patent theatres were here in the West End, in this parish. So the link goes back right the way to there, right through to today. And as you can see, so many of the greats of the profession have their memorial plaques here in St Paul's. We have our own in-house professional theatre company called Iris Theatre, and they do a number of productions through the year. The productions are interesting because they are promenade productions, so the audience move through the garden and move into the church, usually for the finale of the play. We also, of course, have our own in-house orchestra, the Orchestra of St Paul's, but a number of orchestras and choirs come and sing and play. We just did the statistics for last year. We did 425 events last year, so we're really busy. One of our recent projects, we just did the 60th anniversary gala concert of My Fair Lady, because the opening scene of My Fair Lady, of course, takes place on the portico outside the church. And that's to raise money for our latest project, which is to improve disabled access to the church for the whole community. That's kind of the next goal.
Good morning, welcome to the Savoy.
My name is Sean Davern. I'm the very lucky person to be the head butler at the Savoy. I have a team of 28 butlers to make sure that your stay is perfect. I don't know who I'm going to meet and what they might require, but giving you an example that happened this weekend, we had a bride and she'd spilled coffee on her wedding dress. We have to take over that situation, deal with it and make it better. And of course we did. Was the dress perfect? The bride thought so. The hotel was built in 1889. This hotel, particularly for women, was a great changing point. This is the first hotel that had first and home running water, hot and cold, had electricity, had ascending rooms. Now, ascending rooms now are known as lifts or elevators. It is the first hotel where women were seen out in public, dining and eating. And actually, Caesar Ritz was the first general manager. He actually changed the tablecloths to pink to complement the ladies' complexion. We have 2 bars in the hotel. Our American bar, which is actually opened in 1929, and is one of the first cocktail bars in London. We also have created our Beaufort bar, which has equally become very important to people because it's live cabaret, and that just opens in the evening, so it's more of an evening bar. Our 2 bars have been voted the best bars in the world. We're in the top 50. So those accolades, to have 2 bars of that calibre in one hotel is very unusual.
How important are British traditions being kept in the hotel?
Well, it's so funny how afternoon tea has evolved. Of course, it's a very British thing, and it was always a bit of a ladies' thing. Do you know what's happening now also? Businessmen are having afternoon tea instead of having lunch, which is a new trend again. It is quite a relaxing thing to do, but it is one way of coming to savour the beauty of our hotel or the ambience of our hotel, and it is a lovely way to spend an afternoon. But of course, like everything else, nothing ever stands still. You're always trying to find something new, innovative, to encourage people to come back. It is one of the iconic hotels in the world, because when you mention the Savoy anywhere, they know where it is. In the archives in the museum, we had to the best hotel in the world, and the letter arrived at the Savoy.
Next door to the Savoy is Simpson's in the Strand, an historical restaurant that represents a great British tradition. Roast meats carved at your table.
So welcome in Simpson's in the Strand. My name is Nick. I'm currently one of the supervisors here for the Night Spa and the Grand Divan, which is our restaurant. We are located on the Strand, next to the Savoy Hotel. It's a short walk from Charing Cross Station or Covent Garden Station. We are known for the traditional British dishes, for example, famous Sunday roast, and there are various different British items you will find on our menu. We are a traditional restaurant, therefore we stick onto a lot of silver serving, but also different traditional serving styles. Additionally, we have a group of carvers running around the restaurant, serving the different tables, where we serve the traditional roast beef carved on the table side. The carving table side is so unique, we actually transferred this into a workshop or a lecture. So our master cook will teach the different guests who sign up for this course the unique skills of how to carve the perfect roast beef or roast lamb. And then afterwards, we continue with a lunch where they get to invite some of their family members or other guests they would like to invite. And then they can actually practice their skills along the table for their own guests. So Simpson's in the Strand was established in 1828 by a gentleman called Samuel Rees. He originally started as a gentleman's club where people used to come over to have a cigar or talk about politics and also play a game of chess. And then in 1848, a gentleman called John Simpson joined the team. John Simpson was a well-known caterer in London. And in 1848, John Simpson introduced the carving. One of our famous patrons back in the days was Winston Churchill. You get to have the experience just as he had this, because we did not change anything downstairs in the Grand Divan. Because we are listed, we're not allowed to change anything. So whenever you come here to dine, you would have an experience such as Winston Churchill.
London, England, home to everyone who is anyone, from Paddington Bear to the Queen. This great capital has stood at the forefront of industry and culture for a millennia. Best known for our dry wit and wet weather, it is really the people and history of London that make this city so great. We're bringing you a comprehensive guide of all things to see and do in London. From food and drink to unique local attractions, follow us on a journey through this capital steeped in history and discover the hidden wonders of this magnificent city. This is Discover London.
I'm Olivia Cox.
And I'm Derek O'Reilly. And together we're going to take you on a tour of London. Mayfair is famous for its exclusive shops, restaurants and residential properties. The area also has the largest concentration of five-star hotels in London.
Good morning, welcome to Brown's.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Obviously now we're in Mayfair. Is that an area that you need to know a lot about to be a taxi driver?
Well, as you know, Olivia, to drive a taxi in London, you've got to complete the knowledge, which takes
Yes.
3.5 years. Mayfair's key to that because it's so central. And from a taxi perspective, it's a really popular destination. You know, it's somewhere you're going to have to know very, very well.
So tell me a little bit about the history then.
Up until the 17th century, it was just fields, it was farmland around
really?
here. Yeah. it became fashionable almost immediately because people moved out from the city, and this was like a suburb of London, to be honest with you. It's actually named after the Mayfair, which was held in Shepherd's Market. It didn't stay there that long because as the area became fashionable, the residents complained about the fair, so it actually moved over to Bow in East London. Mayfair is an exclusive district. I mean, if you look at New Bond Street, Old Bond Street, all the designer shops are located on those streets.
Yeah, it's got a very luxury feel, hasn't it?
It has, absolutely, yes. Many famous residents lived in Mayfair, and this area has been home to several Prime Ministers. Winston Churchill lived here for a period of time.
But of course, our current Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, she was born around here, wasn't she?
She was. Queen Elizabeth II was born in Bruton Street, and there is actually a plaque there to mark the event. Brown's Hotel is at the heart of Mayfair and has been for, you know, a few hundred years.
And I have to say, it fits perfectly into that feeling of exclusivity and really opulence in Mayfair.
My name is Stuart Johnson. I'm actually the general manager of Brown's Hotel. Brown's is the oldest hotel. It opened in 1837. It was opened by a gentleman called Mr. Brown, who was the butler for Lord Byron, and his wife. They were given some money. They started off the hotel actually in Dover Street, where they acquired a first house and then subsequently a few more and created Brown's Hotel. And so we are 11 townhouses that are connected into 117 bedrooms. And we are situated right in the heart of London, right in the heart of Mayfair, right in the heart of England. And therefore, we emanate an English experience.
The hotel boasts several bars and restaurants, including the beautifully realised Donovan Bar. Named after the famous photographer, guests can enjoy an array of stunning cocktails. There is also some rather risque artwork in this booth known as the Naughty Corner.
Cheers. Cheers.
Brown's has welcomed many, many famous guests over the years. Agatha Christie based Bertram's Hotel on Brown's. Alexander Graham Bell made the first UK telephone call from Brown's. Queen Victoria used to come for afternoon tea. Rudyard Kipling wrote The Jungle Book, and we're actually sitting today in the Kipling suite that is just recently being remodelled.
Like the rest of the hotel, the suite was designed and crafted to be quintessentially English, with artefacts placed as if they were in a patron's home.
Kipling was a frequent visitor. He stayed many, many times. Actually, in the entrance hall of the suite in which we sit, there is a letter to which he wrote from Brown's. So therefore, provenance that he was a regular guest. We have a desk that is situated actually in the bedroom of this suite, to which we believe he sat and quilled The Jungle Book.
The Hicks Mayfair restaurant specialises in the finest British seasonal cuisine and is adorned by artwork especially commissioned for the space.
2 large Tracy Emin neons hang in the restaurant, and so from both fashion, the art world and literary world, Brown's maintains its space in history.
History was certainly made when Theodore Roosevelt decided to stay at Brown's.
Teddy Roosevelt was married from Brown's, having stayed a week here, and walked to St George's, Hanover Square.
And St George's Church is our next stop in Mayfair.
My name is Stephen Wickner, and I'm the parish administrator of St George's, Hanover Square in Mayfair. The church here was built between 1721 and 1724. It's in the classical style. The church was built in response to expansion of London westwards, and the big houses that were built in the area in the early 18th century reflected the needs of the people coming up for the London season. They needed the assistance of servants, they needed lawyers, they needed doctors, they needed the whole business of life. St George's has always been a wedding church, and it still have a number of fairly high-profile weddings each year. President Teddy Roosevelt, the poet Shelley, the author George Eliot, Marconi was married here, Amy Johnson was married here. There are a number of interesting features in the church. When looking for a new organ, as we did a few years ago, we ended up with an excellent company in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who built us the very fine organ that we now have. As you come in the door is the window in the East End, which is not typical of the classical style of the 18th century. This is highly coloured and in fact is 16th century Flemish glass, which as far as we know was looted by Napoleon at the beginning of the 19th century, ended up in a warehouse in storage and was taken out in about 1840. I believe the cost was £1,000, and part of it was put in here. It didn't all go in because the windows here were the wrong shape, and there are parts of the glass that you'll find in a parish church in Wiltshire.
Time to explore the art world in Mayfair. And on the way, we called in on Trumpers, a barber shop established over 100 years ago. The interior retains the original mahogany cubicles and glass display cases which were installed in the early 20th century. So now we have arrived at one of Mayfair's many art galleries. Let's meet the owner, John Martin.
Hi, John.
Hello, Olivia. Welcome.
Hi, nice
Hello.
to meet you.
John, nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
This is a pretty amazing space, tucked away up here.
I was on the ground floor for about 20 years, and we moved up in the summer, and actually it's been fantastic. Wonderful light.
Yeah,
How long have you been here? Since 1992, so coming up to a quarter century.
That's quite a big anniversary, that one. It feels like a very arty area around here.
Oh yes, and it has been for 150 years. I mean, now there are 190 galleries in Mayfair and St James's, and like ours, many of them are tucked away, first floor, second floor, third floor, as well as the ones on ground level. You really rely on the public to be brave and ring the buzzers. Once you're through the door, you'll always get a great welcome, and it's free. And there's a lot of expertise here. If you know, particularly with old master paintings, people will be very happy to talk to you about it. So some galleries are showing older work. For us, I always like working with artists, so living artists.
Could you tell me something about this artist's work?
Yeah, so this is John Capel. All his paintings are based on his family's history and his history in one corner of Somerset. And what he's painting are memories almost, or folklores or reminiscences of Somerset as it was probably about 200 plus years ago. This is 2 years' work. This is another really important thing. It's why the exhibition is so important for an artist. This is their moment on the stage, if you like. And this is when the critics come, the collectors come, other artists come. This is what they work towards.
Yeah. Right.
And all of these paintings are all related, so they're like different chapters in the same, in a novel. The Browns London Art Weekend happens the first week in July, so that's where most of the galleries in the area are open on a Saturday, Sunday. It's a very, very friendly atmosphere. We encourage families to come and to start exploring what goes on in this area around the Royal Academy.
Both art and science have had a home at the Royal Institution for over 200 years, and Charlotte is curator of collections. Could you tell me something about where we are, please, Charlotte?
So this is the main lecture theatre of the Royal Institution, and we've been here since 1799. The Royal Institution was formed to be a public place of science, and we're the UK's oldest science communication institution. The development of photography was announced here by Henry Fox Talbot in 1839. James Clerk Maxwell did his 3-colour photograph and demonstrated that to the public here for the first time. Muybridge showed the zoetrope and the moving images for the first time here. The discovery of the electron was announced here. So those kind of people want to come and stand where Faraday lectured, or where the great and the good lectured.
So when you say that things were discovered or invented here, was this a working laboratory?
Yes, and we still have, I think there's 6 wet chemistry laboratories in the building where we're doing a project with UCL on nanotechnology.
What's your favourite part of the whole building?
My favourite part is the library. It's so light, and before this lecture theatre was converted into the space that you see now in 1800, the library held the early lecture space, and there's a fantastic mirror in the library that has stood in that space since 1804 and has not moved. The museum holds all of the discoveries that were made in the building or used in lectures, including all of Faraday's apparatus. And you'll get quite a surprise when you go down to the museum and you'll see things like the first ever thermos flask, for instance, that was made here in 1892. Greenhouse gases were discovered here in 1861 by John Tyndall. John Tyndall also proved why the sky was blue and did all of that kind of research here. And then Humphrey Davy. 2016 is the 200th anniversary of the development of the miner's safety lamp, so the Davy lamp, and all of the original Davy lamps are downstairs.
Now we can visit one of my favourite restaurants within the area.
My name is Marco Fiori. We're here in Fino's in Mount Street. I've been in Mayfair, through the maths, coming up to a few weeks shy of 60 years. As you see it today, it's a bigger, more developed site from where it was in the early 70s, because when my father opened up in 71, it was a bit of an overspill from the other restaurants he had upstairs and across the road. We do have customers who keep coming back to us and say, well, don't change it, don't do this, don't do that. So whenever we do anything, we just tinker with it in the smallest possible way. We've got this beautiful copper bar area. It's a fantastic, lovely area. Then we've got the boardroom, which is the room over here on the right, which is the seating area, but we use this for parties, lunches, dinners, so we can set it up in all sorts of different ways. Let's try to move with the times, bring the menu and the quality up to top level. We import all our wine directly from Italy. I have my suppliers in Parma, which is our hometown in Italy, and we buy Parma ham from there, cheese from there. So we like to buy everything from source and have a genuine product. In this area, we have quite a lot of people in the specialist car industry here, brokers, etc. So they have sort of business drinks and fun as well, mostly, because business and fun and business go together. And with a drink, it sort of makes things move along a bit better. Funny that. Obviously, we love to see new customers, so everyone's welcome at Fino's from all over the world, because that's where our customer base is from. As long as you've got a pound in your pocket, you're away.
I'm Charles Somers-Smith. I'm Secretary and Chief Executive of the Royal Academy of Arts. The Royal Academy was established in 1768. It was set up partly to run an art school, partly in order to have an annual exhibition, and partly to represent the interests of artists. Now, we're best known for doing really big exhibitions, but we still do what we originally were set out to do: teach students, look after the interests of artists, and hold the annual summer exhibition. We've got big exhibitions coming up. We plan about 5 years in advance. The big exhibition next autumn is we're doing an exhibition about abstract expressionism, which will be a huge survey and of great importance. We're very, very unusual. Most people think we're funded by the government. We're not and never have been. When we have been offered government funding, we've turned it down twice in the 1830s and again in the 1860s. The government tried to incorporate us as a sort of Ministry of Culture. But the artists have always wanted to be free and independent. We're sitting in the drawing studio of the Royal Academy Schools. We run a small postgraduate art school, and we have done ever since 1769. It takes about 50 students, and traditionally they used to do drawing in this room. We're now one of the very few art schools where we cover the cost of fees so that we get very, very good students. Increasingly, we produce students who are tremendously successful. Lynette Yodemboki was nominated for the Turner Prize in 2013. She's only one amongst a quite large number, increasingly large number of students who are going on to do great things.
Olivia, Savile Row. Let's go and get fitted up.
Okay.
Come on.
I'm Ray Stowers, and this is my business, Stowers London. Totally about 33 years or so I've been working on Savile Row, and I would say honestly in about the last year I've really sort of pinpointed what my vision of Savile Row should be. So we are quite different to the other shops. My thing is we make everything and anything. We make a wardrobe for people rather than just be classified as bespoke tailors. You style, design, advise people when to wear it, when not to wear it. So we'll make you your business suit, dinner suits, morning suits, all the usual stuff, but I'll make you a crocodile jacket. I'll get someone come in and I want to do a fancy lining. I want to do something fancy because I really want to give someone something individual. We'll still make them a, you know, classic suit, but we'll make them something a bit fun as well. There's one for you, Derek. This is a jacket for someone. So the address is in London.
So people will come to you and ask for a specific lining?
Yeah, we have them streets, maps, money, all sorts. We have thousands, you know, probably 10,000 fabrics there, and we're looking for new ones all the time.
Ray, I noticed that this is a little bit more fitted than some of your other suits. Is it ladies' tailoring?
Yeah, with the ladies, we make any style, any design, fashion pieces, classic pieces. Same principle as men, but a little bit more fashion-led. Really, the beauty of our business is everything is transportable. A couple of weeks back, I was in LA, New York. We go to the Middle East, Kazakhstan, Russia, anywhere. The way it works, I can, you know, meet a customer in here today and then fit them next week in Moscow.
Right.
So it gives you that complete flexibility.
The Red Lion has been described as a perfect example of a small Victorian gin palace at its best. Thanks to surviving the Blitz completely intact, it's become one of London's rare examples of original ornate Victoriana at its finest. And the beer tastes pretty good too.
Our main clientele they are all office people. Between 12 o'clock and 8 o'clock at night, it's all offices and people who work in the area. When the tourists come in the weekend, it's lovely because you get another side of the atmosphere. If they want to see the landlady here, so I spend most of the time here, even in my days off. If you are a tourist, if you are a worker, if you're just having a coffee around the corner, if you go to the church, please come here to the Red Lion.
I'm Michelle Alland. I am the Chief Executive of Handel & Hendricks in London. It's a great example of Georgian architecture in central London. We like to consider it a hidden gem of Mayfair. And what's amazing about it is Handel lived here for 30 years, so fans of Handel can come here and really take a pilgrimage to see where he worked, he performed, he rehearsed the operas. He probably wrote over 30 pieces while he was here. So he was a great musical innovator, a great composer. We have the music room. What's amazing about the music room is he actually performed the Messiah in the room. He would rehearse his operas. He would have neighbors over and have recitals for the neighbors. I love the Kirkman harpsichord. It was just loaned to us by the Warburg family. It's a beautiful historic instrument, which you don't see often. And then also his bedroom, where he would have lived, and he also died in that room, so it's quite historic. You can sort of take time travel, so you step out of the hustle and bustle and you have this lovely Georgian home. So you suddenly step back into the 1730s, which is an amazing feeling, and then you go up the creaky stairs and all the original floorboards are here, and then you step into the 1960s when you hit the Hendricks part of the house. The blue plaque was outside when Jimi Hendrix lived there, so Hendrix was his neighbor a couple hundred years later. We love to think of it as a house dedicated to music. In the 1960s, Brook Street was lively and lots of fashion, lots of music. It was a perfect place for Hendrix to be. Between all of the photographic evidence and also the living memory of Kathy Etchingham, his girlfriend at the time, who he lived with, we were able to recreate the space 99.9% exactly as it was. We had a delivery man who worked at Love's Cafe. Mr. Love's was right below. And he came in, he was 19 at the time delivering food, and he came in and he had to sit down. He said, "This is surreal, I'm just having a flashback to being 19 years old and walking into this place." Hendrix had 3 vinyls of Handel. And he really loved the Messiah and the Hallelujah chorus he loved as well. So he was a fan. Handel was German, Hendrix was American, and they came and they found their fame and fortune here in London. So London really gave them sort of their success. It was a long period to put the house together, a long period, a process of love. but everything has been painstakingly restored so fans can experience it as it was.
My name's Ed Maggs. I'm an antiquarian bookseller with my family firm, Maggs Brothers Limited, who were established in the 1850s. We've been in Mayfair for the best part of 100 years, the firm. We buy and sell old books. It's as simple as that. Books, manuscripts, autographs, things connected with those areas. The oldest things we regularly sell would be pre-printing Babylonian seals, clay tablets, things like that, which are relatively common in commerce. And you might be dealing with something 2,000 or 3,000 years before Christ there. What every collector loves is dealing with a collection that's been intact for centuries. The longer it's been off the market, the more attractive it is. It's all seamless these days, the internet and printed catalogues, and we travel a lot to book fairs and visiting libraries and so on. But we do think that having a shop and having a physical presence in the West End and central London is always going to be critical, is always going to be very important. We've got an extraordinary man called Dr. Titus Berder, English, Japanese and Chinese educated, and he over the last 20 years has been running our Chinese and Japanese department. He specialises in Japanese photography, Japanese photo books, and the early history of exploration of the Pacific and the Far East. Booksellers love dealing in things that aren't books. They leaven the diet a little bit. My favourite object here is the Livingston fire grate, moulded with Dr. Livingston on it, the hero of the age. The favourite book in stock right now? I think it might be T. Lawrence's copy of the stamp book he did, Cairo in 1918. Somehow they found the energy and the time and the love more or less in the height of the war to produce an extraordinarily elaborate book about the stamps they had designed for the newly established Kingdom of the Hejaz. And this is a book I've always loved, and I've now got T. Lawrence's own copy of that book. I'd snatched that from the flames, I think. Price range varies from the tens to the millions. A sort of a median price might be several hundreds, high hundreds, thousands. You can start making a good book collection with tens of pounds. On the other hand, if you buy in an informed way and you buy with love and enthusiasm, you're likely to make something of cultural value and in which the components actually become more valuable because of the collection they are in.
London, England, home to everyone who is anyone, from Paddington Bear to the Queen. This great capital has stood at the forefront of industry and culture for a millennia. Best known for our dry wit and wet weather, it is really the people and history of London that make this city so great. We're bringing you a comprehensive guide of all things to see and do in London. From food and drink to unique local attractions, follow us on a journey through this capital steeped in history and discover the hidden wonders of this magnificent city. This is Discover London.
I'm Olivia Cox.
And I'm Derek O'Reilly, and together we're going to take you on a tour of London. Today we will be looking at the historical London borough of Southwark. Situated on the south bank of the River Thames, Southwark is the historical home of the capital's entertainment industry.
It's reinventing itself and in a really lovely way.
It's a very vibrant area.
Being here feels like home.
Hey, Derek.
Our first stop is the George Inn, where we're going to meet a local historian to tell us about the area.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
And you too. Lovely to meet you, Olivia.
Please educate me. I know so little about this area, even though I grew up in London. It's scary.
We're in the George Inn, the historic inn in Southwark. The current building dates from the 1600s, and there's parts of it that dates from the 17th century, the 18th century. People have been drinking, eating, enjoying hospitality here for many, many years, and the historic connotations of this place are just incredible. It was basically a pub, And also you could actually stay here overnight. Southwark was the main centre of people who were arriving in London or leaving London, going to places like Canterbury, for example, on pilgrimages. The horses would stay here. You'd have a lot of stabling for horses. You could get yourself a nice fresh change of horse from the George Inn. So these were the forerunners of the modern-day motel and the modern-day hotel.
And if we leave here, we go out onto the street.
Yes.
Where are we?
We're basically on Borough High Street, and we're right in the heart of historic Southwark. And then if you go a little bit further down, you're right on the River Thames as well. When the Romans arrived in the London area, that was 43 AD, they populated the north shore of the River Thames. But of course, having just conquered the entire Roman Empire, they were quite keen to see what was on the other side of the River Thames. So they built a wooden pontoon bridge, and they actually walked across here to Southwark.
So that bridge that they built as a pontoon bridge, would that be the sort of forerunner of modern-day London Bridge, or...?
Yes, very much so. It was one of the first bridges to actually go across the River Thames. Eventually they decided to build one of stone, because that seemed like quite a sensible idea. But this whole area of Southwark started to be built up by the Romans, and then carried on from there. Bishops of Winchester had their headquarters here. And the reason that they did that was in the days before the Reformation, before the 16th century, they were very powerful statesmen as well as being clergymen. So they built themselves Winchester Palace, which is pretty much on the banks of the River Thames. And that was an enormous complex. They had a great hall, which you can still see to this day. You can still see the remnants of that. It had a cellar underneath where they stored all the wine. And in fact, there was actually a tunnel leading directly from the cellar right the way onto the banks of the Thames. One of the things that they got involved with, I have to say was quite interesting, was prostitution, believe it or not.
Wow.
The ladies, because they were actually under the auspices of the Bishops of Winchester, got known euphemistically as the Winchester geese. And the local church was St Saviour's, which has since become Southwark Cathedral. They weren't allowed to be buried in the churchyard. So the actual clergy who made money out of their activities...
That's horrific.
Yeah. So they got buried in a little patch of land. And it was only when they were building the Jubilee Line extension that they found remnants of bones that they then went and forensically examined and realised that these were the bones of very young women, often with syphilis. They often were the bones of babies in there, prematurely born babies. And they realised that this was the actual burial ground for the Winchester geese.
Wow.
That had previously been completely denied a proper Christian burial.
Could you tell us a little bit about the sort of crime and punishment in the area?
People who were bawdy or badly behaved, even the women in the area, got locked up in what was called the clink.
So it was a mixed prison?
It was a mixed prison. It was probably one of the first ever mixed prisons.
Wow.
Not that that's a good thing. This was a prison where people could be in there for quite some time. Unless you had friends on the outside, you could starve in there. Well, it wasn't all prisons and misery in this area. Good old City of London banned theatres at one time, so this is why they set up over here in Southwark. You basically had over here the Globe Theatre, you had the Swan and you had the Hoe, and of course Shakespeare made his name by performing plays over here. And indeed it's said that plays were actually Shakespearean plays were performed right outside here in the courtyard. You've still got the wonderful feeling of the old Southwark, and you can lose yourself down all the alleyways and beautiful places like this, like the George. And then right slap bang next to it, you've got the Shard, one of the most innovative buildings in the whole of Europe.
Just a short walk from the George is the old Operating Theatre Museum and Herb Garrett. And here you can learn about and see how they performed medical surgery throughout the 1800s, before the introduction of anaesthetic.
I'm fascinated by this room that we're in. What can you tell us about it?
Well, this is the old operating theatre of St Thomas's Hospital. It dates back to 1822, and it's one of the few surviving operating theatres pre-anaesthetic, and also before we kind of know any knowledge of germs. It is in fact the oldest operating theatre in Europe. You can see it's mostly made out of woods, not the most cleanest of materials. You'd have had these stands here packed with medical students who were learning about surgery by watching operations taking place. You could have up to about 125 students crammed into this theatre. So all these students would be in their street clothes. Some of them could have bad colds, bad coughs, or could be sneezing, coughing into this room, feeling the air full of germs as well. So the key thing about surgery before anaesthetic is speed. To get the operations over as quickly as possible to minimise the pain of the patients. But from the records we have from this period of this theatre, so it's about 40 years, the survival rate we kind of think is about 1 in 3 people would have survived an operation. This operating table, it's one of our kind of prize exhibits here. This is original 19th century table. There's not many of these around at all.
Tell me about this. This looks fascinating.
Well, this is a original kind of 19th century amputation kit. What we have here is the amputation knives. Of course, we have the bone saw here, much like your common saw you get today to saw through the bone.
You thought that was for wood, didn't you?
Oh, I was hopeful.
You'd have the tourniquet, which is, of course, used to stop blood loss. And we have this instrument here, which are your bone nippers. And this is just to nip away any bits of the splintered bone. And you'd also have your tweezers here. These would just be there to just pull out the arteries, the veins of the leg as tight as possible, knotted together, then all kind of bundled up, and then it's going to be stitched with a fine piece of horsehair. The operating day here is a Friday, so they are very much fewer than today. And we don't have electricity at this time, so natural light is kind of crucial. Yeah. You've got the gas lamps here, which are going to provide a kind of backup kind of light. We'd have the surgeon, of course, and going back to the hygiene issue, the surgeon is going to have to protect his own clothes. It's almost kind of like a pride thing for the surgeon. You know, he's got his students here, and he's kind of showing off how many operations he's done. They're very skilled surgeons. There is this kind of misconception, I think, that surgery is kind of akin to butchery at this time. But the surgeons, you know, they are very well qualified, very kind of knowledgeable about surgery. But of course, dealing with the limitations about no anaesthetic, and also, you know, they don't know anything about germs. So people are dying of infection, but they don't know the reasons.
Next to the old operating theatre is the herb garret. The garret would have held all the ingredients necessary to make up all of the medicines required by the patients next door. And while not quite as bloody and gruesome, there are some equally interesting and disturbing methods used to aid the needy. The herb garret was run by the chief apothecary of St Thomas's Hospital. He was the chief resident medical officer responsible not only for compounding medicines, but for the diagnosis and the treatment for all non-surgical patients. He would have been responsible for paying for all the drugs needed by the hospital out of his own fees. And this was the way the governors used to manage and limit the cost of healthcare. And while a good idea in principle, there were complaints the apothecary made savings on the drugs bill at the expense of the medicines he made. The apothecary was the term used to describe what we would now refer to as a chemist or pharmacist. And St Thomas's employed its first apothecary in 1566 and its last in 1871, when the role of senior medical officer was transferred to the assistant physician. Our next stop is a famous Southwark restaurant right in the heart of Borough Market.
Well, I'm Stuart. I'm the head chef here at Roast. I've been here for about 5 years. Southwark's is sort of seeped in history. I love being right by the river. It's where all the sort of food produce was dropped off from the boat. It's brought into London through here. Walking through the market, you've got the traders unloading, you know, food's being delivered to the suppliers. You know, can walk through, see different vegetables and mushrooms, and the fish is being unloaded, and yeah, especially the oysters and stuff. Roast sets us apart because of where we are, the positioning. You know, to have any restaurant in the middle of a market, it's invaluable, really. You know, it's prime location. The front of the restaurant used to be from Covent Garden flower market. They were going to scrap it, and we managed to save it and rebuild it here and turn it into a restaurant. So it's already got a lot of history. We just want to promote good British seasonal food. Roast signature dish has to be the pork belly, by far. We do a rolled pork belly stuffed with onion and sage. Roast it, all the crackling is in a round piece on a plate with mashed potato and applesauce. If you're in the market, you're shopping, or you're local, you want to go to the theatre down the road, you're quite welcome to come to the bar. I can do some bar snacks, and we do some canapes. We usually have a singer or a jazz band on every night, even a Sunday. Just helps with the atmosphere of the restaurant. I love this area because I'm local. Got a lot of friends and family around here, so being here feels like home. I love coming to work, you know, and for that, it's got to be a bonus for anything, really. You come to work, cook good food, make people happy, go home to bed, up the road.
As you leave Roast, you immediately find yourself in the food paradise of Borough Market. Now administered by a charitable trust, there has been a market here since the 11th century. Open from Monday to Saturday, it's popular with tourists and locals as well as chefs and restaurateurs who not only come to sample and buy the local produce, but also for the unique atmosphere the market offers. And with its huge selection of tasty treats on offer, it's an easy and enjoyable place to consume more than the recommended daily calorie intake. This used to be called St Saviour's Church, and it was once the tallest structure in London. In 1666, it stood at 164 feet.
Good knowledge.
Do you know what it's called now?
I do, Derek. It's Southwark Cathedral.
Well done, you've done your homework. Let's go. Located at the heart of Southwark's Bankside area is the oldest cathedral church building in London, and there has been a church on this site since 606 AD. Although archaeological evidence suggests there was Roman pagan worship here well before that. Previously known as St Saviour's, the name changed to Southwark Cathedral with the creation of the Diocese of Southwark in 1905. Many visitors are drawn to the intricate high altar screen which depicts saints and people connected to the cathedral, and was originally erected by the Bishop of Winchester in 1520, and additional carvings were added at later periods. You can also find local residents that have been commemorated, such as William Shakespeare, who has a memorial window in his honour depicting characters from his plays, and his brother Edmund is also buried within the cathedral. And there is a chapel named after John Harvard, a Southwark resident who emigrated to the United States and who founded the famous university in Boston, Massachusetts, that bears his name today. The cathedral has a long tradition of serving the local community by offering refuge and help to every type of person. And today there are up to 5 services a day that offer guidance or just moments of reflection for residents, workers and visitors. If you're looking for a place to stay or a quick drink and a bite to eat in the area, why not try the Wellington Hotel on Waterloo Road?
My name's Mark Leeds and I'm the manager of the Wellington Hotel in Waterloo. And I was thinking that I'd only be here for 2 years, and those 2 gone into 13 years. The hotel is situated on the western end of Southwark, opposite Waterloo train station. Everyone asks about this mural on the ceiling. The man that actually painted the mural is the man up there with his arm raised up. His name is John Barton. He's actually an actor. He was in a show called Me and My Girl in the West End of London. Inside the mural, there's a few hidden characters of famous people. What I do, if they find they're really interested, then I ask them to find the hidden actors or actresses or people from history. The Wellington is a traditional English pub. We've got 25 bedrooms, all like boutique style. We show a lot of sport here. We do traditional food, and we've got a comprehensive wine menu. You know, you can't go wrong, really.
Several bridges have been built crossing the River Thames at the same point where today's London Bridge spans the river. Not to be confused with the nearby Tower Bridge, which sometimes mistakenly gets referred to as London Bridge. Of all the crossings over the River Thames, London Bridge perhaps has the longest history. The original bridges were wooden constructions and were in constant need of repair, often needing replacement after a short time. The latest version of the bridge, designed by Lord Holford, was opened by Queen Elizabeth in 1973 and crosses the river, joining the city to the more relaxed and creative Bankside.
Welcome on board. My name is Troy Richards. I'm the Chief Exec for the Golden Hind Trust. Golden Hind is a faithful replica. We classify it as an A-class replica. And the reason why she was built is because the original ship was the first maritime museum decreed by Queen Elizabeth I in 1581. Sadly, they didn't know how to maintain her, and she rotted away. Hence, Golden Hind 2 was completed in 1973.
And this is the same?
And this is the replica itself.
Brilliant.
Why is it called the Golden Hind?
Back in 1577, a fleet was sponsored by Queen Elizabeth I and a number of investors. One of them was Christopher Hatton. Now, during the voyage, Christopher Hatton sent Thomas Doughty to oversee his investment. He tried to take over the Golden Hind. Drake found out before the mutiny took place, beheaded Thomas Doughty. Now, because they're very superstitious, they believe if there is mutiny or about to be mutiny on board the ship, you must change the name of the ship. So hence Drake came up with this clever idea of naming the ship off Christopher Hatton's crest, which had this female deer, and hence it was called not the Pelican anymore, but the Golden Hind.
Oh, so the Pelican was the original name?
Pelican was its original name.
So tell us about the colours used on board, because it doesn't really look like a traditional English ship.
So when the ship set sail back in 1577, it set sail in English colours. Colours pale grey, green, and what we call today magnolia. Now, Drake used the Spanish colours as a means of disguising the ship. So black, yellow, and red, those are typical Spanish colours. Set sail in 1577, came back in 1580. The voyage lasted for 2 years and 10 months, almost
nearly 3 years. Wow.
Very, very long voyage. They would have carried pigs, sheep, goats for milk, chickens.
And where would they have been kept?
And that would be on the same deck with the men, so on the gun deck. Comparing it with the Spanish ship, so the building next door is a perfect example of the size of a Spanish ship.
Wow, so you're telling me this boat would have taken on something as big as that?
Exactly. The main advantage inside was the speed. Even though there was hierarchy on board the ship, Drake tried and actually get them working together. There are officers and barber surgeons. The barber surgeons were the barber and the doctor at the same time. And the gunners are the one that effectively keep the ship mobile. They were the one that fought during battles, lift the anchors, lower the sails, etc. While they were at sea, they counted 80 men. So 80 men was on board the ship at the time.
You talked about the gunners. How many guns are on board the ship?
So on the gun deck itself, we had 14. They're not cannons, they're minions. Now, the minions gun were designed to paralyze ships, so not to sink them, but to paralyze them. They would generally aim to shoot the mast, and if you damage a mast on a ship, then the ship will become paralyzed.
So it was a bit like piracy?
It's a bit like piracy, I would say, but the English see him as a privateer.
Ah, I see, not a pirate, a privateer.
He was the first captain to circumnavigate the world. Magellan, the Portuguese sailor, is actually credited to be the first captain to have done so. But Magellan didn't make it around the world. His ship did. Magellan died in the Philippines. So Drake was actually the first captain who have set sail from one country to another. Drake, in fact, died on board the Golden Hind from dysentery just off the coast of Panama, and he was buried in a lead casket. The next few years actually are quite significant years for us. We'll be celebrating the 440 years of Drake circumnavigating the world.
Oh, fantastic.
So obviously a 3-year voyage. We will start our celebration in 2017 and carry on until 2020.
Troy, it's been absolutely fantastic and really interesting to be on board the Golden Hind. We wish you good luck. Thank you very much indeed, Troy.
Pleasure to meet you.
You think you know London? Well, guess again. There are so many incredible gems and hidden histories just waiting to be discovered. In this jam-packed series, we'll take you to every corner of the superb international city that is London, visiting secret local haunts, meeting the people behind them, and unpacking the history of London through their eyes. Hop in and take a ride with us in the London Black Cab. and see this fantastic city in the fast lane. Today I'm heading to the east of London to visit London Docklands and the surrounding area. London Docklands is the part of London by the Thames riverfront, which was, at one time, the world's largest port. No longer used as a port, the area was extensively redeveloped from the 1970s onwards and is now a thriving and cutting-edge hub of London commerce. First stop today is the Isle of Dogs, and I'm meeting an old friend to find out more about the area's fascinating nautical past.
Well, welcome to the Isle of Dogs.
Why is it called the Isle of Dogs? Where did the name come from?
Well, the short answer is nobody knows. Some people go with the literal answer that there were hunting dogs kennelled here, royal hunting dogs. Some say Henry VIII, which puts us in the early 1500s. Some say Edward III in the 1300s. Doesn't seem likely to me. There was no hunting round here. It's more likely the corruption of some other word. The one I favour is Isle of Dykes, because in the medieval period, the Isle of Dogs was flooded twice a day because it was on the floodplain of the River Thames. And so Dutch engineers were brought over to build defences against the river. And obviously they were used to building dykes in the Netherlands because it's so low-lying. And so it's possibly a corruption of dykes. But it was certainly being called Isle of Dogs by the 1540s because it's recorded as that in shipping records.
Now, the area has, again, dramatically changed, like lots of places in London. Can you just tell me a little bit of the history of the place?
The Isle of Dogs really was pasture land, and prominent butchers of the city would own plots of land and they would graze their cattle here. And that was going on really until the 1850s, before the Millwall Dock was built. Even after the West India docks at the top of the island were built, there was still a lot of agrarian economy on the island itself.
How did it become industrialised? What was the key factor?
Well, the key factor was the docks. You had Black Wall, which is at the downriver side of the island. That's where the basic embarkation points were. So there were shipyards there where two of Henry VIII's warships were repaired. Frobisher, who set out to find the Northwest Passage across the top of Canada, so you didn't have to go around Cape Fear to get the Pacific. He left from Black Wall. Further upriver around Limehouse, Ratcliffe, Wapping, that's where the shipyards were for repair. There was such congestion in the river in the 18th century that docks were needed in order to accommodate shipping, because cargoes would be sitting for about a month or so, and obviously you've got your investment tied up, but also it was prone to pilfering. So that's why you needed the docks. And the story of the docks starts just at the north end of the island with West India Docks. So the West India Docks open in 1802, and then the East India Docks at Blackwall 1806, so they're quite early on. Then the Millwall Dock comes in 1868. So you've got more and more workers there, and so they need to be accommodated. So increasingly, streets are being laid out for the dock workers, and indeed, ship's captains, people like that.
So, David, on my travels here in the taxi, I noticed a lot of the streets have exotic names. Cuba Street, for example. Does that have any relevance to what would have been going on there?
The authentic streets do. They refer sometimes to the particular companies that dealt with certain countries, and so they would accommodate their ship's captains in terraces of houses there. Or alternatively, it may be to do with the particular areas of the docks where certain cargoes are brought ashore. But there are also less authentic streets with nautical names that owe their existence to the development of the area in the 80s.
Right, so Mastmaker Road and Spindrift Avenue and all these, they're sort of new?
Absolutely, they're far from kosher.
The Docklands Light Railway's had a profound effect on the area, enables people to get out here.
Well, the Docklands Light Railway, the DLR, which came into being in 1987, was the salvation of the area, really, because it wasn't really served by anything except a couple of bus routes. And if you're building an enterprise zone and you're trying to attract big business, you don't want them getting the bus.
No.
And so a computerised light railway was the answer. And it has extended significantly. It goes right out across the Lee to Beckton and places like that, and the Excel Centre around the Royal Docks. And nowadays goes under the river to Greenwich, because originally it actually terminated at Island Gardens at the bottom of the island, and you had to walk through the foot tunnel.
Ah, let's talk about the foot tunnel. I've never actually walked through it.
Well, Greenwich Foot Tunnel was there to replace the old ferry. Right. So if you go down to Island Gardens station, nearby there's a pub that commemorates the old ferry that used to go across. Primarily a horse ferry to transfer people's horses across, but also used by pedestrians. But you need a more permanent crossing, and the foot tunnel provided that.
So one of the ways that people obviously get out here is in the back of my taxi, but another pleasurable way to come out is on the river taxi.
Oh yes. The river taxis essentially are taking us back in time, because the Thames was the main transport artery before the 20th century. And as I understand it, the first proper commuting done by river was when the Daily Telegraph newspaper moved from Fleet Street to Docklands.
Okay.
And they established a river taxi for their employees to come from Fleet Street out to Docklands and back again. But it's become an increasingly popular way to move from the island into the city and back again. In fact, your reach goes all the way from Richmond upriver in Surrey, all the way down to Greenwich. The services are fairly frequent and quite inexpensive, and you're waiting by the river, which is an attractive place to wait anyway.
And there's no traffic jams yet on the river?
Not just yet, no, not like there were in the 18th century.
Yeah. My next port of call is the Ragged School Museum, which recreates Victorian life in and around the East End. At the heart of the museum is the classroom, and each year up to 16,000 children come to experience life in a Victorian school. Equipped with desks, traditional blackboard and the dreaded cane, the room has been faithfully recreated as one of Dr. Barnardo's original classrooms, as it would have appeared when the social reformer arrived from Dublin and set up the first free school for poor children of the East End. It's a really interesting place to visit, and I managed to leave without getting any extra homework. The Jeffrey Museum is a beautiful 18th century almshouse and a much loved oasis in the heart of the East End.
Welcome to the Jeffrey Museum in East London. My name's Hannah Fleming and I'm one of the curators here. Before the museum existed, these buildings functioned as working almshouses for 200 years, and they were founded by a man called Robert Jeffrey, who was a big figure in the City of London, and he'd been master of the Company of Ironmongers, one of the city livery companies. At the beginning of the 20th century, the London County Council stepped in, bought the site, preserved the buildings, and opened the gardens to the public in 1912.
Where did the inspiration come from for the museum?
Yeah.
As we walk around, I mean, it's fascinating.
There was a plan for it to be a furniture museum to reflect the local trade, which was the furniture trade, which had grown up around here. At the same time that the London County Council was opening this museum, it was also actually demolishing quite a lot of other properties. And so they were ending up with a lot of architectural salvage from houses, things like stairways, doors, door knockers, balconies that they didn't know what to do with. So a lot of that material came to the Jeffrey. And by the time the museum opened, its displays were always much broader than just furniture.
So can you tell me something about the layout, how we walk from room to room, you know, the areas that we're going through?
So what's really nice, I think, about the museum is we have a very straightforward chronology. So we start off with our first room in 1630, and it's a merchant's hall in a London townhouse. You'll walk through the 17th, 18th, 19th and 20th centuries and end up in the 1990s in a converted warehouse apartment in Shoreditch. Each room represents the main living space in the home of a middling or middle-class Londoner.
Right.
And then in the 1990s, the museum had a new extension built, which hooks onto the corner of the almshouses. And as we walk into that section of the museum, then you'll come to the 20th century rooms. So the final room, the 1990s converted warehouse, there were a lot of industrial warehouses that were falling into disuse. So hence why they became residential apartments.
What can you tell me about the room we're currently standing in?
So we're standing in a 1745 parlour. We're in the middle of the 18th century in a London townhouse. Nothing post-dates, 1745, everything is an original object from that time. And the parlour would have been the room where you could have some meals, you might have dined in here, but also where you would have socialised, where your friends and acquaintances would have come and you could have drunk tea. So the middling sorts at this point are quite focused on the idea of politeness. It's a sort of code of behaviour that governs everything that you do. Your behaviour, your sort of deportment, your conversation, and also how you actually furnish your room. Things aren't supposed to be too gaudy, too elaborate. There's supposed to be a sort of element of restraint. One interesting story is with the porcelain tea bowls and saucers. Those particular tea bowls and saucers were part of a huge cargo of porcelain put onto Chinese junk that was sailing to Europe, and it sunk off the coast of Vietnam in a place called Ca Mau in about 1725 and lay undisturbed for hundreds of years, and then the wreck was found by some Vietnamese fishermen, I think, and brought up to the surface and auctioned off in the 1990s. You'll find lots and lots of that porcelain in museums all over the world.
Oh, what a fantastic story, isn't it?
What's really nice is that for the middling sort of people the museum was interested in, they would have had lots and lots of bits of porcelain like that.
As I walked along the corridor, I noticed the chapel.
The chapel was part of the original almshouse buildings. That would have been quite common for almshouses to have had a chapel, and the pensioners that lived here were obliged to attend service every Sunday or they could be fined. It's got a monument to Robert Jeffrey, the almshouse's founder, in there. When he died, he was buried in his local church, St Dionis on Lime Street, which was a Wren church. But then when that was demolished in the 19th century, the monument to him was moved and came here, and his body and that of his wife were also moved, and they're now buried in a small graveyard in the gardens here.
One of the things I found as I walked around and looked at the dates, you explain what happened in that era.
The idea is that you're getting to see these rooms in context. So as you walk past the rooms, you can see, what's changing in terms of interior decoration and furniture history, but really it's also about social history and people's lives and what's going on in the world around them and how that affects how they live at home. And that's the story we're interested in. Up until probably the middle of the 20th century, most of the objects you'll see on display in the museum have been purchased. From the mid-20th century onwards, then we rely very heavily on donations.
Okay.
Because we're particularly interested in the personal stories behind objects, who bought them, how they felt about them, how they were used in their home, what their home was like, all those stories. That's what we really want to get from people, to understand how people lived at home.
Next, I'm off to Sutton House, a Tudor home built in 1535 by a prominent courtier of Henry VIII, Sir Ralph Sadler. The house retains much of the atmosphere of a Tudor home, despite some alterations by later occupants that included a succession of merchants, Huguenot silk weavers and even squatters. It features oak-panelled rooms, original fireplaces and a charming courtyard. The house was taken over by squatters in the 1980s before the local community rallied together to save Sutton House. The linen fold parlour is the room that gets its name from the intricate patterns carved into the wood panelling. Historically, the cellar would have been used to store things like beer, wine and food. Today, it reveals the foundations of the house. Brick construction was unusual at the time and marks Sutton House as a place of some importance. Formerly a panelled room whose panels were damaged when the house stood empty in the 1980s, the former gallery now serves as a contemporary art space, the bare walls exposing the history and construction once hidden. Here we have the Great Chamber. It has been used as a social space throughout the history of the house. One of the former owners was the wealthy silk merchant Captain John Millward. He brought home elaborate silk decorations from the Far East in the 1600s, and the room contains a treasure trove of his exciting discoveries from abroad. By the early 1980s, Sutton House stood empty. The departure of its previous tenants left it exposed to damage from vandalism, theft and fire. And in the middle of the decade, the house was occupied by squatters, which actually provided a measure of security for the building. And to celebrate the 30th anniversary of their time, this room has been turned into an exhibit of a squatter's bedroom. The Georgian parlour reflects the renovations of the mid-1700s, when Sutton House was first divided up. This is the time the house began its long association with the Huguenots, French Protestants who came to England as refugees. The house has its own chapel, located in the cellar, which dates from the original construction of the house. For almost 50 years, between 1891 and 1939, Sutton House was home to the St John and Hackney Church Institute, which aimed to promote the spiritual, mental, social and physical welfare of young men. The Tudor kitchen was a place that would have been hot and noisy as servants cooked food for the family and guests above. Leading us onto the courtyard and Wenlock Barn, this area was originally the Tudor Flower Garden. Built in 1904 by the St John's Institute as an area for functions, it still provides the same usage today. The Breakers Yard Garden is in reference to the industrial past of the area. And after consulting over 1,000 local residents, it was created to playfully celebrate the past history of the house. From Tudor courtiers to squatters, Sutton House certainly has had a colourful past. If it's not the past, but the future that you're interested in, how about a visit to the IMT Gallery?
My name's Mark Jackson. I'm the curator here at IMT Gallery in Bethnal Green. IMT Gallery started back in 2005 by a group of curators and gallerists. And we were interested in putting together a space that put on the kinds of exhibitions that we weren't seeing in other spaces in London. And we were particularly interested in supporting artists who worked straight out of their degrees, as well as artists who are more well-known, more established figures. One of the things we like to do in terms of the kinds of work we're showing is demonstrate the exciting breadth of practices that artists have. So we usually have about 6 exhibitions a year, sometimes a few more, sometimes a few less, depending on what we're doing. And alongside that, we also have a program of talks, of performance artworks. So it's quite a varied, quite an eclectic program at the gallery. This exhibition that we've got on at the moment is by David Burrows, called What the Frog's Eyes No Longer Tell the Frog's Brain. And these works are a combination of tactile collage techniques, cut-out paper, cut-out cardboard, hand-painted objects, at the same time as being very much a kind of post-internet phenomenon. There's text and images that you'll be familiar with perhaps from spam emails on the World Wide Web. And Burrows is really interested in the way that image making and image presentation has changed since the internet. The idea that traditional art would have one very expensive painting accessible to a rich patron, for example, whereas images now become more powerful, become more accessible the smaller, the lower in detail they are, because they can fly over the internet, and how that might change our understanding of art. What makes us different from a lot of other galleries is that we can take more risks with artists that we think are interesting, with the kinds of projects that might not happen in other spaces. And so the kind of things you're coming to see when you come and see at IMT Gallery, the majority of them won't happen anywhere else. It'll be quite a unique experience for that. Sometimes the exhibitions we show are quite challenging, intellectually speaking, but hopefully they're also presented in a way that makes them accessible and exciting. Because we're a gallery that shows a lot of new media, video work, for example, or net art, we like to engage with technology in terms of how we reach our audiences, and also how we present the shows, how we extend the shows beyond the bricks and mortar of the gallery here in Bethnal Green. So we're quite an early adopter of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook to reach new audiences, and also to get people excited about the gallery who might not have even visited the space. Over the last few decades, the East End of London has become particularly well known for being a space for art galleries. Artists started to find interesting studio spaces here, old warehouse spaces, things like that, and then the galleries started moving in to represent their work. And so you have, like within a stone's throw, a number of different gallery spaces, different types of gallery spaces. And just down the road, obviously the V&A Museum of Childhood, the Whitechapel Gallery that operates a bus tour that frequently comes to visit us in the exhibitions we do. So it's a very kind of, I suppose it's a very lively part of London in terms of exhibitions. Some of the exhibitions we've done in the past, Malaysian artist Yak Bose Chong Boon Pok turned the gallery into a Malaysian-style cafe, or we had the Polish composer Marek Holeniewski transform the gallery into a gigantic light sensor so that when people moved through the space, it created sounds and images. And one of the things that we've really tried to concentrate on is that this is a unique experience. It's a challenging experience, perhaps, for some arts visitors, but hopefully a unique and exciting one. Something where you leave the gallery knowing that your interest in contemporary art has broadened, that the ideas presented have perhaps been challenged you in some way, but mainly that it can be an accessible and exciting experience for all who visit the gallery.
Welcome to the Royal Docks. This area has seen a dramatic transformation over the last decade. However, its heritage and history are still very apparent today. Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Derek O'Reilly. I'm a London taxi driver. Could you tell me where we are?
We're in the Royal Docks. I'm the managing director of the company who look after the Royal Docks. If you'd been standing here 30, 40 years ago, you'd be looking at a dock full of ships. And this is what the Royal Docks were created for. They were created at a time when the other docks in London had become too small for the big, large, ironclad steamships. If you think this was all marshland before it was built, and without heavy machinery, they built these docks that are 13 metres deep. Can you imagine digging 13 metres down into the marshland and creating these huge spaces for docks for ships? And I just think it's an incredible piece of Victorian engineering. And they were created in 3 parts. So the dock in front of us now, this is Royal Victoria Dock, and that was the first dock to be built around about 1870. And behind us, where the Crystal Building is, used to be a lock that connected Royal Victoria Dock to the river. 4 kilometres from here to the far end of the docks is the main lock today. And what was added over time were Royal Albert Dock, King George V Dock, and Pontoon Dock. So by about 1920, these docks were absolutely booming, and the whole of the area was dependent on the docks for work. And they lived in unbelievably deprived conditions. So the docks boomed in the 1920s, but as large containerised shipping came along, even these docks were too small to take ships that large. In fact, those ships couldn't get this far downriver. So gradually the Royal Docks started to decline. And by 1982, the last cargo ship came into the Royal Docks and they were closed. This caused tremendous problems for people in the area. And the London Docklands Development Corporation was created at that point, and their job was to try and help the area regenerate. And really what you see today is a result of those early plans that the London Docklands Development Corporation put together and plans that we've taken on with the Greater London Authority. We're quite keen not to lose that connection with the past, so we've been running a programme called Forgotten Stories. And the idea of that is that we realise that the generation that used to work here when this was a working docks are now very, very old. And we wanted to capture their stories about the Royal Docks so we didn't lose the history of this place. For example, what used to happen is all the ships would sound their horns on New Year's Eve, and everyone would come out of their houses and wish each other Happy New Year. And we captured with a couple of people who were kids at the time of what it was like, and we found some sound footage of all the ships sounding their horns in the Royal Docks. It's incredible to hear all of the ships. You suddenly realise how many ships would have been in here. One of the guys I've got to know pretty well tells the story of what this place was like during the Second World War. And if you think, they estimate 25,000 bombs were dropped on the docks of London during the Second World War. And he remembers as a little boy coming out of the house and hearing all the ack-ack guns going and all the barriers of guns that were all positioned around the Royal Docks. And the Royal Docks took a tremendous hammering during the Second World War. But these people were so tough, and they would just pick themselves up and get on with work that was so vitally important for the war effort, including, indeed, building the temporary harbours for the Normandy invasions when they happened, were built right here in the Royal Docks. So what we've been able to do is capture an archive of lots of really fascinating stories of what it was like round here. We can look around today, it looks amazing, but you know, the history is what this place is all about, and that's what we're really tried to capture. The first thing that came here was an airport, believe it or not, and that's London City Airport, which is down in the middle of the docks. We've got ExCeL, which is the big exhibition centre for London, and we've also got a university at the far end, University of East London. We're going to be doing all sorts of things here in the water to try and encourage people to use this place as a destination for leisure. So we have a beach during the summer. We have all sorts of water sports going on. Even mad people tonight will be doing some open water swimming in that water in this sub-zero
this
temperature. I know. They've got to be nuts. But we have all sorts of things going on. Wakeboarding. We've got a big regatta centre down the far end, so sailing and canoeing and rowing going on. I mean, it's already got some great things to offer. And what we're going to be doing with the new developments is giving people even more reason to come out to the docks. So the whole idea is try and bring life back to this place and get people to come here and appreciate it for what it is.
Mike, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
I don't often get journeys out to the Docklands at the moment, but I'm hoping that that will improve and increase with your future developments. Next stop for me is the Gun, a public house in the heart of London's Docklands, which has a rich history and unrivalled riverside views.
Morning, Derek. Welcome to the Gun Cold Harbour. My name is Jean-Paul Turenne. I'm the General Manager of the Gun at Cold Harbour, which is a beautiful Grade 2 listed building.
I haven't been in the Gun for over 20 years. I've noticed there's been some changes.
Yeah, there's been quite a few changes, I think, since you would have frequented the venue. The Docklands area used to be a working docks area. As you can see by the dockers' cottages, those people have obviously moved out, and there's a new worker that has now moved to the Docklands area. It's obviously become a lot more upmarket, a lot more popular, especially that Canary Wharf are just on our doorstep.
Walking around the pub, I noticed various dining areas.
We have 3 private dining rooms, this being one of them, the River Room. We also have the cabin room downstairs, which can seat up to 22 people. We also have the Red Room, which can seat, again, 22 people.
So which bar are we in now?
So we're seated in the gun room. As you can see, we have beautiful guns which adorn the walls over here. And it's also the room where we have a unique feature of the pub, which is the secret staircase, which is just here behind me, actually. So the secret staircase used to work its way up to the River Room upstairs, which used to be sleeping quarters. But behind me as well were 2 spy holes just behind those 2 clocks. And when servicemen or revenue men used to come into the pub and want to remove the contraband that was being sold through the pub, those that used to run the pub would obviously observe them coming through into this area through those spy holes.
So pirates would have actually traded within the pub of contraband?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, what a great story.
Where we're standing, just behind this boarded up area over here, is where that secret staircase would come out.
Oh, right, OK, so went from here down to where we were
Correct,
earlier.
down to the gun room, and this also then would give access to the River Room, which we are standing behind as well. The Gun used to be frequented by Lord Horatio Nelson and his mistress, Lady Emma Hamilton. They used to meet in this room. It used to be sleeping quarters back in those days, and the secret staircase is how they used to access the room to avoid being seen by anybody that was in the pub. It used to be Lord Horatio Nelson's local pub, and he used to live in Cold Harbour Lane, 20 doors down.
And the areas outside, I'm intrigued.
The terrace that we have, which is quite unique, the roof and the windows can open up so you can be drinking and dining al fresco outside. Should it be cold, it's warm, we have heaters inside that terrace as well. It's fantastic drinking and dining alongside the Thames. So we have a beautiful event space adjacent to the Gun that we've themed this year along the lines of a gin garden. So we have outdoor games, we have ping pong out there, we have giant Connect Fours. We also sell 13 different types of gins through the bar outside. It's alongside the river with unspoiled views of the Thames and the O2.
So this is the herb garden.
4 years ago, my then head chef, Quentin, him and I thought, well, you know, we've got this space that's just being used for nothing really. We thought, well, let's put some herbs into the garden. And every year we put new herbs in. We put some strawberry sometimes when it comes close to the season as well. So we use that, you know, closing in on June and July, especially for Wimbledon. So on a daily basis, when they create their dishes for the fresh fish specials, they come out and they'll pick some herbs in the garden. It's a great spot actually outside here where we are. It's also the busiest part of the river where we are located. And that docking area, you know, all the naval boats, when they dock in Canary Wharf, they'll pass through this area. That blue bridge will sort of lift up. Makes, I think, the space quite unique out here by the river.
Yeah, make an exciting place to be, I should
definitely.
imagine. Now on to the Good Hotel, which unusually is floating in the Royal Docks.
My name is Alba. I'm the brand trainer and activator within Good Hotel London.
This hotel was originally in Amsterdam. This platform was built not with the aim of being moved, but our CEO Martin is very driven. So together with a group of engineers, they found a way to move the platform. The most difficult part was at the end, here in London, because the canal is very narrow. It was less than a meter left each side. We wait here until the city airport was closed. Due to safety reasons, we were not able to be around while the airport is working. So then finally, at night, we moved the platform to its final destination here in Royal Victoria Docks. East London is quite trendy nowadays. We are well connected with the city centre. There is underground, just 2 minutes walk from the hotel. And then we have different leisure options around. Mainly is the cable car, where you can go to O2. There are some exhibitions, concerts, and also you can take a boat and then you can go through the city centre by the Thames. Also, we have the Excel Conference Centre and Siemens conference centres. Good Hotel Group is focused on people, so we measure our success based on the amount of people that we positively impact. These people can be guests that they come here just to enjoy their stay with us, but also we run a training program. We collaborate together with the council here to recruit long-term unemployed people from the borough. We help them to have a career within the hospitality sector. We try to contract with local suppliers in terms of food, in terms of drink or external services. We also run a project to try to engage with our neighbors. So we create events, we have special rates for them, so local business can use our meeting rooms. In regards to our dining options, we have our living room. It's an open space. Our idea is to make our guests feel at home, but also we try to encourage people to interact. This is why we have this design. We have different ambiances. Some areas is more like a proper living room with sofas and low tables. Other areas it's more like a long table. Our food options, we offer tapas, it's small dishes that is aimed to be shared. So then also you can try many different kind of food. We have a bar that is also part of the living room. We try to have local drinks as part of our philosophy, but also we try to engage our employees to be part of our menu. Rob is our bartender, and he has some of its own cocktails in our menu. We have also Faye that had created some smoothies. We have 4 different kinds of rooms. We have a street view, we have a river view, and then deluxe room. Deluxe is facing also the river, but the bed is slightly bigger. And the window is on one side of the bed, so it's very nice in the morning to wake up with those views. We have 4 new rooms, it's junior suite, so they are located on the corners, but facing the river, and they are bigger, and it's good for families with kids, for example. So personally, I think that Good Hotel London is unique. It's floating in the Thames. It has a very different design and vibe, and also it's a business that is supporting a social goal. There is nothing else that is in London.
You cannot visit the East End without a visit to G. Kelly's and sampling the area's famous pie and mash. It's lovely.
Welcome to G. Kelly. We're in the heart of the East End in Bow, just off the Roman Road.
As a London cab driver, I am familiar with pie and mash shops all over London. But could you just tell me the history of this dish?
Pie mash came to be in a shop round about the late 1800s when the street sellers of pies and street sellers of eels decided to join together and open up in shops and outcompeted people in the street. So the pie is just British minced beef. All our beef actually comes from a farm down in Wiltshire. And the liquor was originally made to be served with stewed eels.
Okay.
So they'd make the stewed eels up and then they'd add a batter, which is just flour and water, and then add parsley to it as like a light flavouring. So that's where it came from. Our liquor today doesn't contain any eels. It's sort of evolved to be a match with the pie, but we still do sell the eels alongside.
What's the correct drink to have with pie and mash?
There's two schools of thought here, and really I think it depends what temperature it is outside. So if it's a cold day, you've got to have a good English cup of tea. But if it's, it's a bit warm, you have a small orange juice.
What do you always recommend should follow?
So we always have apple crumbles, which is a really traditional English dish, either with custard or ice cream.
I mean, I don't think there's a Londoner alive who's never experienced pie and mash at some time. Is it as popular today as it's always been?
So probably the peak of popularity was in the 70s, but we're finding now in the last sort of 5 years, it's becoming more and more popular as people sort of get in touch with more basic foods and appreciate our food traditions of poor man's food. There's a lot of interest around it.
I mean, I have pie and mash on a Friday, but I was just intrigued to see, do you have a day that's busier than the other days?
So always Saturdays have been the busiest because we've got the market, people have got time off in the day and it's traditionally something you eat at lunchtime. But now we've got the West Ham football stadium just down the road, so we're getting pretty busy on match days.
This shop looks quite traditional to me. Can you tell me something about the history of this particular shop?
Yeah, so this shop opened up in 1939. It was opened by a guy called George Kelly, who was my great uncle.
Oh, right.
He didn't have any kids. He actually passed it along to my granddad. So I'm fourth generation pie and mash owner. So for me, what I find quite interesting is how the decor's changed, because we were very, very busy and we got a lot damaged in the Blitz.
Right.
This one's constantly evolved. So underneath these tiles here are the original ones, which we're actually hopefully restoring. So
okay.
We're putting back the original marble tables.
Did you continue to trade during the war?
Yeah, during the war, my grandfather actually managed to negotiate for a meat ration.
Oh, right.
So the Ministry of Food would drop off the ration for the week to be able to feed the poor workforce of East London at the time, which was really suffering.
Mm. So it really is traditional East End. You've got West Ham football ground, pie and mash on a Saturday. I suppose you couldn't ask for much more, could you?
Yeah, you don't get more East End than this.
Tucked away on Mare Street is the Last Tuesday Society, and my curiosity has got the better of me, so I'm off to find out what this is all about.
Hello, Derek. My name is Victor Wind, and I'd like to welcome you to my Museum of Curiosities, Fine Art and Natural History.
Well, Mr. Wind, thank you for having me here today on this delightful mocktail. I wish it was something stronger, but obviously I'm driving. On my travels around the East End, I have been to some truly amazing places. But I've got to tell you, this takes the biscuit. It's absolutely incredible. What's the story behind it?
Well, over 10 years ago, I opened this place as a curiosity shop because I couldn't find a proper curiosity shop. It was a curiosity shop and an art gallery. People come, they come to a shop, they walk around, they leave. It wasn't particularly enjoyable, whereas I wanted people to come and spend as much time as possible and to enjoy it more. I wanted to create a classic cabinet of wonders. Everything that glistens and is marvellous and fills me with joy and happiness, I've put it in a cabinet. It's the story of the inside of my mind.
How did you collect all of this stuff?
Every child collects the seashells they find on the shore, the pebbles, the toy soldiers, and I'm afraid I've never grown out of the childish desire.
Do you have any regular events that are held here?
I do a guided tour twice a month. I do a storytelling evening. We have cocktail masterclasses, we have lectures, and once a month we have a petting zoo with pythons and tarantulas and scorpions. And they come in and people get to know them and stroke them and pet them and feed them. We also have taxidermy classes.
taxidermy classes?
Yes, I run the British Academy of Taxidermy, which is the largest taxidermy academy in Europe. We have 2 or 3 classes a week. Everything from stuffing a mouse to stuffing a fox or a deer or a goat or a crab.
And people can book to come to these courses?
Yes, they sell out quickly.
I can imagine. What I find fascinating is downstairs is the museum, and upstairs where we are at the moment is a cocktail bar.
Having a cocktail bar where people can come and drink the finest cocktails, I think it increases the enjoyment. And the same, because upstairs in the cocktail bar we have the art gallery. But if you go to a museum or an art gallery, I think it's terribly dull. The idea is here you can come and you can sit down in a comfortable chair, you can have some good drinks, and you can really get to experience and spend time with pictures. The idea of the museum was this sort of place where all the odds and bods and the strays and the people who don't quite fit in can come here. We welcome those who are interested in the other side of life.
Well, it's certainly a fascinating and riveting place. I'm almost lost for words at some of the exhibits that are here, and I will certainly be making a return journey. I'm in the East End of London. You wouldn't believe it. I'm in this calm, peaceful oasis that is Tower Hamlets Cemetery, an incredible place.
My name's Kenneth Greenway and I'm the manager here at Tower Hamlets Cemetery Park, and I work for the charity that care for the site. We're just behind Mile End Tube Station, literally a short 5-minute walk.
Now, standing here, you would never guess you were a 5-minute walk from Mile End Tube Station. I mean, the environment here is fantastic. What can you tell me about the history of this cemetery?
Historically, we're a closed cemetery. We're one of London's Magnificent Seven, so most people have heard of Highgate, Nunhead, Kensal Green, Brompton, West Norwood and Abney Park. We're the least well known and often the last to be visited, but it makes us no less special. We were an active cemetery up until 1966, when we were closed by Act of Parliament and redeclared a public park. So that's how we defend the heritage here, through managing it as a woodland nature reserve. We're the only woodland in the borough and the most urban woodland in London, and so we're all about creating a little piece of the countryside in the city.
Now, walking round the cemetery, I noticed the architecture of the various graves.
The architecture reflects the fashions of the time. They reflect people keeping up with the Joneses, all wanting to be seen to be modern and up to date. So a lot of the monuments will be kind of neoclassical or Gothic, and then as you move towards our closure, they become much more kind of traditional, just a regular kind of rounded top stone or squared. But they do reflect fashions.
On entering the cemetery, I did notice an attractive memorial.
That's probably our war memorial you're referring to there, so it's kind of a half-circle shape. So that's owned and managed by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and it remembers those from this particular area of Tower Hamlets who fought and died in either the First or Second World War. It was relocated in that position in the mid-1990s, so the original monument stood not quite far from us here, but was made from a stone that weathered poorly. It suffered from vandalism, so the Commonwealth War Graves Commission took the monument away, with a view never to have one here again, but we challenged that decision, and then in 1993 we had the plaques returned in a new monument.
How important is the park as opposed to the cemetery?
The cemetery and the park, one doesn't really exist without the other, because this reflects the diversity of East London. There are people from all over the world buried here, but it reflects that the community of East London has always changed. So the way we get people in to see that is by managing it as a park, having this little piece of the countryside in the city where people can enjoy unrivaled opportunities to see plants and animals. So the park is what people need. It's good for mental and physical well-being. It helps people feel better about where they live. And while we're here now, it's bird song that I'm having to raise my voice above. It's not traffic noise. I've swapped tower blocks for trees, and you know, it's wildlife that are sharing their personal lives with me, not human beings.
It is an oasis of calm. You think you know London? Well, guess again. There are so many incredible gems and hidden histories just waiting to be discovered. In this jam-packed series, we'll take you to every corner of the superb international city that is London, visiting secret local haunts, meeting the people behind them, and unpacking the history of London through their eyes. Hop in and take a ride with us in the London Black Cab and see this fantastic city in the fast lane. Today I'll be visiting Hampstead, which is located in northwest London. It is one of London's largest and wildest green open spaces with panoramic views of the city. The area is full of charming streets and is brimming with history. My first stop is to meet a local historian to find out about Hampstead's past and why it has remained so untouched from the developing city of London.
Welcome to the Old Bull and Bush. My name's Diane Burstein. I'm a qualified London Blue Badge tour guide, and I'm here to give you all the information you want to know about Hampstead.
What can you tell me about this pub?
Well, there's been a pub on this site since the 1720s, although we're actually in an early 20th century building at the moment, and we're very near to Hampstead Heath, which was a destination for Londoners, particularly in the early 1900s.
So they would have come here for a day out?
Exactly, because in 1860 you had a station open. It was Hampstead Heath Station, and it would bring people from East London. So it was very much an East Londoner's day out to go to the famous fair. The fair would happen on the 4 bank holidays. So the song really sums up coming along, having a good old sing-song at the Old Bull and Bush, having a Cockney knees up, really. And we still have the fair here today. People are still recommended, really, to come up to Hampstead if you want somewhere that's just 4 miles out of London, but with a village atmosphere. I mean, there are some areas which people will call a village, but they weren't actually villages when it comes to London. But Hampstead really was, because you're 4 to 4.5 miles from the centre of London, and people would come by horse and carriage, horse and cart. It really was a bit of a journey up here because it's one of the highest points. And once you got here, you were in a little village. In fact, the name Hampstead, it's from homestead, home farm. So there would have been a few farms there, a few dwellings, but it wasn't terribly busy. And when people used to look up at the hills of Hampstead, they would think it was snow-capped because there were laundry women who would do their washing up here. People would send the washing up to Hampstead because you had lots of water. Hampstead's history is very much tied up with water and fresh air. And back in the late 17th century, people discovered that there was chalybeate water on the heath, and this had very good healing properties, or so the doctors said. A doctor wrote a pamphlet all about it, and people came here to take the waters, and then they looked around and they thought, well, this is a nice place, I think I'll stay here. And developers started to build houses here.
What sort of people did it attract?
Well, in the early days you had the middle classes, but you did have your poorer people. And when you see some of the smaller cottagey type houses, that would have been where the working people lived. But you also had grand houses. You had wealthy merchants here. So, for example, Fenton House, which is now a museum, that was built for a merchant. And of course there was Kenwood House as well, which is very well known English heritage property, and that for many years was the home of Lord Mansfield, who was the Lord Chief Justice. But you also had a lot of artistic people coming here, writers and artists. The artists were attracted by the fantastic views.
I believe that the anti-Catholic Gordon riots had an effect on Hampstead. What can you tell me about that?
Well, they certainly did, because living here in Hampstead, in Kenwood House, was Lord Mansfield, Lord Chief Justice. And he was rather a liberal judge. He's associated, for example, with the anti-slavery movement. Before the abolition of slavery, he made a judgment saying that while on English soil, no man is a slave. he was also in favour of Catholic emancipation. So when they were discussing in Parliament relaxing the laws that persecuted Catholics and didn't allow them to take high office, for example, or worship, he was one of the people who was in favour of relaxing the laws. So he became a target during the Gordon riots. Now, the Gordon riots are named after Lord George Gordon, and he was one of the main supporters of a group of Protestants who wanted to march on Parliament to protest against this relaxation of the laws. But things got out of hand and riots ensued. One of the things that the rioters did is let the prisoners out of the prisons. Now, then you're asking for trouble, of course, because you've got people who are criminals who are on the streets of London. They burnt down prisons like the famous Clink on the south side of the river, and then they headed to Bloomsbury Square. In Bloomsbury Square was the townhouse of Lord Mansfield, and they succeeded in destroying that. And Mansfield and his wife Elizabeth, they managed to escape through the back door, and up they came to Hampstead, where they thought they would be safe. But the rioters weren't going to leave them alone. They were heading up to Hampstead. And there was Lord Mansfield's nephew, Lord Stormont, and he managed to divert them by encouraging the troops to come out, but also encouraging the rioters to stop and have a drink at the Spaniards Inn, another of our famous pubs here. It's there that the landlord apparently plied them with drink, and they then got very happy and decided, oh, maybe we won't destroy Lord Mansfield's country home.
An excellent way to prevent a riot. Just get everybody drunk.
Give everybody a drink.
Diane, when I'm sort of driving around Hampstead, I often see some curiosities, and one of the one that fascinates me is the parish lockup.
I believe that now it's used as a billiard room, but back in 1730, when the house was first built, we did not have a proper organised police force. You had your local police forces, and if they walked around and they would find you misbehaving, you would be taken to the parish lockup and maybe locked up overnight. Why was it there? Because at one time a magistrate was living in Cannon Hall. When the Metropolitan Police was founded, then they had another lockup, which can also be seen near to St Mary's Catholic Church, and there's a little sign on the wall there that says here was the watch house where the watch used to be, and they would lock people up there. At one time, the land would have been owned by the church, as was most of Hampstead. After the Reformation, you had lords of the manor, and there was a lord of the manor of Hampstead Heath at the end of the 19th century called Thomas Marion Wilson, and he wanted to build houses on the heath. And this is where the people of Hampstead showed their independence. It's a place that's neighbourly, people care about it, and they founded a Save the Heath committee. And Hampstead Heath, unusually, is bigger today than it was in the past. That's because they added to it. So not only did the local committee save the heath, but also in later years you had the Hampstead Heath extension, which was added to it in the early 1900s, and then in the 1920s we had some of the land around Kenwood House. When that ceased to be residential, that was added to the heath, so it's even larger than it ever used to be.
As is the case today, many famous people have lived in Hampstead. My next stop was the home of one of the most famous people of the 20th century, Sigmund Freud.
We're here in 20 Mayfield Gardens, and this is the house that Sigmund Freud settled in with his family in 1938 after fleeing as a refugee from the Nazis in Vienna. In this house, he was also able to bring most of his possessions, the famous psychoanalytic couch, his collection of antiquities, his library, his textiles, all here in this North London house. People are often surprised. They don't realise that Sigmund Freud actually finished his life here in London. So the heart of the house for visitors is to see Sigmund Freud's study as it was set up when Sigmund Freud moved in here. It really does take you back to kind of turn of the century Vienna. It's a very atmospheric space, very evocative. A lot of people say they feel as if Sigmund Freud has just walked out of the room. You know, his glasses are still on the desk. You know, over 2,000 objects that he collected all there in the room. You see not only the famous study, but there are quite a number of other spaces in the house. So, you know, this wonderful hallway. As you come up the stairs from the ground floor up to the first floor, there's a big wide space which gets lovely late afternoon sunlight. Martha Freud, Sigmund's wife, and Minna, sister-in-law, and Anna, his daughter, used to sit in the late afternoon and chat, look out at what was going on in the street, mull over the day. I should also mention Anna Freud, Sigmund Freud's youngest child, who was the only one of his children who actually followed him into psychoanalysis. The museum does actually have a room dedicated to Anna Freud as well, and she's a very important part of this story and the story of this house. The museum has a very active public programme now as well. What we're trying to do is look at life through a psychoanalytic lens and explore Sigmund Freud and Anna Freud's legacy. And an important part of that is the education programme. It's quite innovative, it's very different from ones run in other museums. It's very much about encouraging pupils to kind of think for themselves, to explore some interesting ideas, and perhaps to get over some preconceptions about Freud. There's almost always an exhibition by a very interesting contemporary artist and someone who is responding to the house and the collections in it. At the moment, we have an exhibition by an Indian artist, Bharti Kaur, and her work is woven through the house in with the permanent collections. And included in the collections, we have some interesting artworks ourselves. There is one piece by Sigmund's grandson, Lucian Freud, which he gave to his aunt Anna, and which hangs in the dining room. And we also have a portrait of Freud by Salvador Dali, who was one of the other visitors to him in London in 1938. It's a fascinating small museum. It's in a beautiful house. It contains some wonderful collections, including perhaps the most famous piece of furniture in the world, which is the original psychoanalytic couch covered in this beautiful, rich Persian carpet. Learn more about Sigmund Freud, who, whether you agree or disagree with him, was one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. Plenty to see and plenty to enjoy, and all in the atmosphere of a very welcoming family house.
Down a narrow lane off Heath Street, you will find Berg House, a building from the Queen Anne era steeped in 300 years of history.
My name's Mark, I'm the director of Berg House and Hampstead Museum. Berg House was saved from the council in 1979, and we're here to keep this beautiful Queen Anne building open to the public for free. We're a museum on the local area, we have an art gallery and a cultural hub for anything that happens around here, from concerts to talks to workshops with children. It all happens in this building. We're in the Christopher Wade room, named after one of the great gents who saved the house. Christopher Wade was a local historian and wrote many, many books on the local area and the history of it. It has changing temporary exhibitions. The one that you're currently seeing at the moment is a retrospective of a wonderful Hampstead-based artist called Ishbel McVerta. And it allows us to work with people in the community to celebrate the culture around here. So sometimes it will have retrospectives like this one. Sometimes we'll focus on specific parts of history and our own collection to show there.
Noticed a room downstairs that appeared as almost like a small concert hall.
Well, we have a music room. It's a beautiful panelled room, but the room was always called a music room, even back to the Victorian period, in a different shape and form. It had an organ in for the Grills family, so they could have their family concerts there. Since the 1970s, it's been a place where musicians can hire to put on lovely recitals.
What's the story behind the Hampstead Museum?
Well, the Hampstead Museum was officially accredited in 1991. We were already collecting objects related to the local area. We now have nearly 4,000 objects in our collection, and they range from a great painting collection to fantastic photographs of London and Hampstead, to more peculiar objects. There's definitely a set of skis in there somewhere. There's the famous high hill penguin from the bookshop on the High Street, which is one of the last remaining penguin display models, to shop signs, odd bricks, even a bag of rusty nails. They've all got a story behind them. They're all incredibly important in terms of remembering the people that lived here, the art and the creativity that Hampstead inspired over the years. Burgh House was originally built in 1704. It was built on land reclaimed from Hampstead Heath. This was the only building between here and Camden. It was built for a couple called the Sewells, and they were merchants in fabric, but more importantly, they were Protestant dissenters, and the reason they chose here was outside of the City of London's boundary, which meant they could practice their religion. At the very end of its life, before the Second World War, its last resident was the daughter of Rudyard Kipling. They lived here until his death. We know he came here an awful lot, and what you see in the house at the moment is a little bit sympathetic to the 20th century, to those early years of the 20th century, when this really was quite a swanky home in Hampstead. But then the war happened, and this house was left empty. It survived, not a drop of bomb damage to it, although the area around it was pretty much lost. Come the 1970s, the house was full of rot, it had holes in the roof, and we're left with this Grade 1 listed building that no one knew what to do with. And some great residents of Hampstead got together and decided, no, we're going to save it for the community. And back in those days, there was Judi Dench and Michael Palin, Melvyn Bragg. They all shook their buckets in the High Street, and 35 years later, here we are.
Five minutes walk from Hampstead Underground Station is Fenton House. This 17th century merchant's house was built around 1686 by a master builder. It was bequeathed to the National Trust in 1952 by Lady Catherine Binning, who bought the house in 1936. A splendid wall garden surrounds the building and contains a 300-year-old apple orchard, a kitchen garden, as well as manicured lawns and hedges. A painted lead statue of a shepherd cast in 1735 overlooks the lawn. It's really hard to believe that you are in London. As well as being a beautiful building, it's home to an interesting collection of art, porcelain and early musical instruments. The staircase houses a collection of watercolour paintings bequeathed by the actor Peter Barkworth, a former local resident. Included is a painting of seahorses, which was Lady Binning's personal favourite. She sold it, but later repurchased it. Fenton House is home to a collection of early keyboard and string instruments known as the Benton Collection, named after its acquirer, Major George Henry Benton Fletcher. The earliest of these is an Italian harpsichord which dates back to 1540. In another room is an early 17th century harpsichord, rescued by Benton Fletcher from a cellar in Florence, where it was being used as a carpenter's workbench. Amazingly, all of these instruments are played and can be enjoyed by visitors each Wednesday afternoon. There are also regular concerts held at the house throughout the year. Lady Binning was an avid collector of Meissen porcelain. Her collection is displayed alongside English porcelain around the house. In the Oriental Room, you will find a collection of Chinese art from the Ming Dynasty. As well as artwork, the walls are lined with 18th century needlework of incredible intricacy. Fenton House, originally called Ostend House, was bought by Philip Fenton in 1793. The house has had 22 different owners prior to becoming a National Trust property. The National Trust has now been its longest proprietor. A makeover in the early 1970s was overseen by designer John Beresford Fowler. And although each of its previous owners made alterations, the house remains largely in its original state. Although Hampstead contains many interesting and historical art galleries, houses and museums, the Cato Gallery on Heath Street is home to a much more modern art scene.
Hampstead's a unique place to be. The architecture's fantastic around here. You can get yourself lost in all the little back streets. It's just an incredibly charming place, and we wouldn't move for the world. Our current exhibition is John Duffin, that we've represented now for 6 years. This is his third solo exhibition. He essentially paints London, although he does do New York and Paris. He's introduced to this exhibition. His unique perspective on his images are that he has this view from above, as if you're flying through and over the city. One of my favourite pieces in the current exhibition are the underground pieces. They're lit up, they're atmospheric, they have that late night London feel to them. One of the unique artists that we do exhibit is Ian Berry. When I first saw his work, I wasn't particularly impressed until I was told that it was made out of denim. And at this point I thought, okay, let's have a look at it. It sounds different, it sounds unusual. Ian sent one over to me from his home in Sweden, and we unpacked it, put it out into the gallery, just to get an idea of what people thought about it. The first person who walked through the door wanted to buy it. From that point onwards, we thought, yeah, we've got somebody very, very unique here. You do have to see the work. It is very difficult to convey the quality of the work on a printed page or even on a film. He spends most of his days crawling around on his hands and knees looking for that unique piece that's going to create the images that he does. He's been represented by us for about 6 years and had 3 solo shows. All have been sellouts. The room we're sitting in at the moment is exhibiting examples of a variety of different artists that we represent, whether it's the sculpture or paintings, but we like to be able to show a number of different artworks at the same time. We represent about 6 or 7 different sculptors. One of our artists, who is James Mortimer, he is also a sculptor as well. It is in fact his sculptures that inspire the artworks. We've only just started selling these, but they have a very unique, quirky feel to them and have a slight sense of humour to them that once you've seen the paintings, the sculptures make more sense. Other artists we represent are Mark Hall. He's known as the Conker Man, although he does an awful lot of other art sculpture. The large cherries that we have here is an outdoor piece, which again gives people options where they can put different pieces of artwork. We're currently exhibiting Allies by Lawrence Hollister outside the gallery at the moment, which is our sculpture. It's Churchill and Roosevelt sitting on a bench that everybody sits between and has their photograph taken on, which is #1 selfie spot in Hampstead at the moment. Very, very popular. When it goes, it will be missed because we've had it there 10 years ago and sold an edition at that point. When it disappeared, everybody was, where has your sculpture gone? So we have new pieces every six to 8 months. To keep our programme looking fresh and interesting is vital to us. So we like to bring in 2 or 3 new artists a year. We are approached possibly 25 times a week from all over the world. What we are looking for is something that's unique and of a particular quality. So you have to be quite selective. We represent maybe 50 different artists, and we think that most of those have a very unique way of expressing themselves. We try to keep it a very comfortable environment for people to be in, almost like being in their own living room rather than an intimidating gallery space. We change exhibitions every 3 to 4 weeks, so whenever you come into the gallery, it looks very different. We try to appeal to a broad collecting base, so all of our artists are very different. It never looks the same. Our window changes every 3 to 4 days. We want it to look fresh the whole time.
Amongst the many interesting and historical houses in Hampstead, perhaps one stands out, the imposing Kenwood House, which is an English heritage property.
Welcome to Kenwood House. My name is Jerzy Kierkuch-Biliński. I'm the curator of the Ivy Bequest, so I have the rather lovely job of looking after this beautiful 18th century villa and the extraordinary collection of paintings it houses.
Could you tell me a bit about the history of this wonderful building?
Well, a house has stood here at Kenwood since about 1616, but really the house as it appears today is the product of two building phases dating to the 18th century. The house was acquired by a Scottish gentleman, William Murray, in 1754. Now, Murray had trained as a barrister in London, and he's best remembered today as a towering figure of British legal history. Many of the cases he tried concerned the slave trade, and these led to the formation of the first abolitionist movements in this country, which finally came to fruition at the beginning of the 19th century with the abolition of slavery in the British Empire. When he acquired Kenwood in 1754, acquired quite a small, plain house, and he soon realised that this house was rather too mediocre for his purposes. He got a young up-and-coming Scottish architect called Robert Adam to work on the building. Adam remodelled the house, transforming what was a relatively modest villa into this neoclassical building that we see today. He added a beautiful north portico, a grand imposing entranceway to the house. He remodelled the ground floor rooms, most notably erecting a beautiful and celebrated library. It's considered one of Robert's masterpieces in architecture, as well as creating a beautiful south front which overlooks the landscape grounds with views down to London.
Talking about the library, I noticed the ceiling in there was particularly ornate.
Yes, Murray clearly spent all his budget when doing up Kenwood on the library. It was built from scratch. It's not part of the earlier remodelled house. He collected books, he loved books, and he employed Adam to create a room really that looks back to Roman architecture. Robert had spent 4 years in the 1750s in Italy, learning about classical architecture, meeting the great European architects and artists who were working in Italy at that time. Once he came back to London and set up his architectural practice, he decided that he would draw upon those lessons. And that's really what the ceiling and wall paintings in the library at Kenwood are. They're not just decorative, they're there to evoke the great Italian collection of classical paintings.
What can you tell me about the collection within the house?
The collection of paintings in the house is relatively small, but it's absolutely choice. Kenwood was acquired in 1925 by Edward Cecil Guinness, the first Earl of Ivy. Guinness was the sole proprietor of the Guinness Brewery when it was floated on the stock market, and at the age of 38, he basically retires. It's quite nice if you can do that. And he indulges, one of his pastimes, if you can call it that, was collecting paintings. He in fact made his first major purchase of a painting at the age of 27. He buys a Rembrandt. Again, very nice if you've got the money to do that. But once he's retired, he starts collecting in a more concentrated manner. He collects mainly in the 1890s up until the early 20th century. He acquires a collection of 300 paintings, exceptional works, paintings by Rembrandt, as I say, Hogarth, Watteau, but also Guinness forms a taste for 18th century British portraiture. These paintings by artists such as Gainsborough and Reynolds are just coming onto the art market, and Guinness starts collecting them, and he collects the finest examples. Now, in 1925, he decides that he wants to make a gift to the nation, and he acquires Kenwood and the surrounding estate, not to live in. He intends to use Kenwood as a setting for 63 paintings from his private collection, which he hand-picks. And these are the paintings that you can now see at Kenwood, although the collection has grown. The paintings in Kenwood were intended to create a type of romantic feeling. Guinness wanted you to come to Kenwood, walk through the beautiful landscape grounds, enter this delectable 18th century villa and view these paintings. The idea being that you would have the impression that these paintings have always been here, that this is the taste of an 18th century gentleman connoisseur. But actually, when you look at the paintings he selected, these really reflect his own personal interests. He loved field sports, so we have many hunting scenes. He was a fine yachtsman, so we have paintings by Turner and 17th century Dutch maritime artists such as Cuyp. He also, quite clearly, looking at the selection here, had an eye for society ladies, because there are very few portraits of men in the collection. The other aspect of his interest as a collector, as a connoisseur, was Dutch art of the 17th century. And we have two of the greatest paintings in any collection in Britain, a work by Rembrandt, his Portrait of an Artist of 1665, and a tiny jewel-like painting by Johannes Vermeer, the guitar player, of 1672. These are absolutely exceptional paintings that have an international significance.
Now, we talked briefly about the gardens and the grounds. Can we go into a bit more detail?
Kenwood was quite an extensive estate in the 17th and 18th centuries, and it appears that in the 18th century the grounds were quite formally designed. In fact, they contained many specimen plants. Kenwood at that point belonged to the Earl of Bute, who, as I'm sure you may know, was instrumental in setting up Kew Gardens, and he used Kenwood as a type of retreat to undertake scientific studies and experiments. He was interested in botany and science, but also as a place where he could plant some of his specimens, although how they survived and thrived in the rather cold and exposed hills of Hampstead is another question. When Lord Mansfield acquired the house in 1754, he started remodelling the grounds, turning the formal gardens into a more informal English landscape garden. But it's really under the second Earl, the early 1790s, that the grounds take their current form. The second Earl of Mansfield employed Humphrey Repton to remodel the grounds as they appear today. Repton opened up views where you could see London in the distance. So really, as you see Kenwood's grounds today, it's the work of Humphrey Repton.
Do you have a particular room in the house that you feel more at home in, your favourite room?
Well, bar the dining room, which I must say I do love, because it's very rich, warm colours, and of course the paintings. The music room is amazing because you have in the music room some of the greatest paintings, portraits by Sir Joshua Reynolds and Thomas Gainsborough in any British collection. Particularly Gainsborough's portrait of Mary Countess Howe is an incredible work. Absolutely monumental painting and beautifully handled as well. Gainsborough's handling of the oil paint is absolutely exquisite in that work. Another room I particularly like is a very small room, a very intimate space, Lord Mansfield's former dressing room. It was used really by Mansfield as a type of study, where he would work over his legal papers and documents, and where he would receive his business guests, people he was working with in terms of his legal practice in the centre of London. Its scale, the fact that much of the decorative scheme still survives, does give one a feeling of Mansfield as a man, his presence, and perhaps bring you as close as possible to encountering the person who engaged Robert Adam to create this wonderful house.
On my travels around Hampstead, I discovered a hidden gem tucked away on the heath. Golders Hill Park's landscape grounds contain beautiful plant displays which include the peaceful Mediterranean water gardens, a popular cafe and a bandstand. There is also a variety of leisure facilities which includes a small zoo, which is the only place in London where you can see reindeer. Located on the west side of the heath, Golders Hill Park was opened to the public in 1898 and has been managed as a discreet and historically important part of Hampstead Heath by the City of London since 1989. Located inside the north entrance of Golders Hill Park is a very sweet fountain called Boy with a Fish by renowned sculptor Mark Wilfred Batten. Within Golders Hill Park there is a fantastic walled garden which is currently being transformed with a new planting scheme and refurbishments. The new design uses a broad palette of planting in all of the beds, giving a new unity and a greater overall impact on the space. Clipped cubes of evergreen oak trees will emerge from the box planters, giving an imposing architectural presence in the winter months. The evergreen oak, native to the Mediterranean, will link this garden with the existing Mediterranean garden, and new views will open up through the borders and across the park to the bandstand.
An interesting feature and a habitat for wildlife is the Golders Hill Park Stumpery. A stumpery is an artistically arranged collection of tree stumps planted with ferns and woodland plants which develops the right conditions for mosses and lichens to flourish. The stumpery is located in an area previously occupied by low-grade amenity planting and is designed as a natural sculpture. It provides nesting and feeding sites for insects and birds and has plenty of hiding places for small mammals such as squirrels and hedgehogs. The first stumpery in the country was built in 1856 at Biddulph Grange Gardens in Staffordshire and is now managed by the National Trust. They became popular in Victorian gardens, but later fell out of favour. However, they have now once again become fashionable, in part due to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, who recently created his own stumpery. The Hampstead Pergola and Hill Garden is a wonderful example of faded grandeur and is undeniably one of London's hidden treasures. It is essentially a raised walkway, overgrown with vines and exotic flowers. The pergola dates back to 1904, when Lord Leverhulme, a wealthy philanthropist and lover of landscape gardening, purchased a large townhouse on the Heath called The Hill. Over the following year, Lord Leverhulme expanded his estate by acquiring the surrounding land, and with his newfound space, he decided to build a legacy, his pergola. Unfortunately, after Lord Leverhulme's death, the pergola went into a slow decline, and to this day is still a shell of its former opulence. However, what it lacks in sparkle and shine, it more than makes up for in atmosphere. Today, the pergola and hill gardens are distinctive, moody and eerie. The sense of faded grandeur is everywhere, and even with the recent restorations, it hasn't lost this unique character. Located opposite Golders Hill Park, the Old Bull and Bush is a wonderfully atmospheric Grade 2 listed pub. The earliest record of a building here is of a farmhouse in 1645. The farmhouse gained a licence to sell ale in 1721. English artists Thomas Gainsborough, Joshua Reynolds and William Hogarth all drank here, and Hogarth is believed to have been involved in planting the pub garden. The pub gained a music licence in 1867, when Henry Humphreys was the landlord, and the pub became popular as a day trip for cockneys, resulting in the Florrie-Ford song Down at the Old Bull and Bush. The pub was one of only a few totally smoke-free pubs before the smoking ban in 2007. Today, the pub is a fully refurbished gastropub with stylish interior, freshly prepared food using seasonal ingredients and a warm and friendly atmosphere. My next stop is a family-run restaurant set in the heart of Hampstead Village.
I, along with my wife, created Lagaf in '62.
It's a family run and people can feel comfortable and feel at home when they're coming here.
When I first started here, it was a cafe. Ever since, never want to move because the place was close to the underground, but above all, gave me the heath, the open space. I came from Italy, from a background of 2 catering school diplomas. Worked in a French restaurant for 3 years with flambé and silver service. So I came to work in a place called the Marylebone Lane, just off Oxford Street. And I was there for 3 years before I came here, thing like this. And that's hence helped me to have Lagaf. The name was given to me by a Spanish au pair. And this lady came, why not Lagaf? Lagaf? Oh, what is that? It's a mistake. And then I thought, why not? My wife is Cypriot, I'm Italian. We have a French restaurant in London. And Lagaf is created. So for the first 21 years, we had the French bistro.
Initially, when we opened, we just occupied 109 Heath Street. With my mum and dad working very hard, they were able to acquire 107 Heath Street. So able to expand the restaurant outwards. And then again, we're able to acquire 111 Heath Street. So then we're able to vastly extend the restaurant, extend the kitchen. we found ourselves with a lot of space upstairs in the building. So we started to offer rooms. And over the years, we've evolved. So we've gone from 6 bedrooms to now, currently, we have 18.
When we started, as you see, it's only 4 dishes.
We concentrate on some dishes that are popular and that we like to make, and we give our own twist on it. For our wines, we take great care with our selection. We work closely with a few different Italian suppliers. Our wines are predominantly Italian, although we do have some New World wines, Argentinian wine we've got on the menu at the moment. So we like to refresh it every so often, see what current trends are. But there are a few core wines that, tried and trusted, we really enjoy, our customers really enjoy. So the most important thing, above all else, is that I carry on the traditions that have been put in place by my mum and dad. They've created a wonderful, special environment here, a place that has been a home and a haven for so many people over the decades.
Always I've been honest and true, and this year, 54 years later.
Hidden amongst Hampstead's beautiful architecture are also some fascinating churches. Marilyn, firstly, thanks for agreeing to meet me here this morning. One of the things that fascinates me is the churches here, and I have 3 churches in particular. What can you tell me about this one, St John's in Church Row?
Well, this is very interesting because this is on the site of the oldest church in Hampstead. There's been a church recorded here since the 1300s, but some people think there may have been a church here before that because Hampstead is actually recorded in the Domesday Book. As I say, it's not the original church now. That church fell to rack and ruin, and by the mid-18th century, the congregation were refusing to come here because it was so dangerous, bits flying on top of them. So the trustees of the church actually petitioned to Parliament to see if they would give them £2,500 for the repairs, and they actually refused it. And so the Lord of the Manor of Hampstead donated £1,000, and then the rest was donated by public subscription from the parishioners.
And famous people associated with the church?
Well, my favourite is John Constable. He's got a huge family tomb here. His wife sadly died in Hampstead in 1828 of TB, and he decided at that point he wanted to be buried alongside her, and in fact 6 out of their 7 children were buried here. But also there's tombs to John Harrison, who discovered longitude, some of the de Morio family, some of the Gilbert Scott family. There's a whole host of really famous people buried here.
Which is what you would expect in Hampstead.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time to move on now to one of my other churches. So Marilyn, St Mary's.
It was founded just over 200 years ago in 1816, and it was founded by the Abbé Morel, who was actually a refugee from France, from northern France. He was a man from the clergy. About 5,000 clergymen came as refugees to England after the French Revolution, and he moved to Hampstead, and he just thought it was fantastic, and he lived here right to his end of his life in 1852. He's buried in the porch of the church, apparently buried in vestments he himself made and that he used to wear for special sacramental occasions. In 1829 was the Catholic Emancipation Act.
Right, yeah.
And until then, Catholics weren't allowed to openly practice. So St Mary's Church, if you see the road it's in, it's just small cottages.
Yeah, yeah.
So it only actually looked like a small cottage until the 1850s. There was another ruling saying that Catholics were allowed to ring church bells.
Oh, right.
So they changed the frontage of the church in 1850 so that it's got this lovely bell tower and the statue of the Virgin on it as well. It's had a number of important people associated with it as well. So again, the Gilbert Scott family were involved in some of the decorations and interiors for it, and they worshipped there. Judi Dench was married there to Michael Williams, and they helped with raising funds for the church. Also, Graham Greene was married there earlier
Was he, the
on
writer?
as well. That's right.
We're now in Downshire Hill, which is one of my favourite cut-throughs in Hampstead. I use it a lot in the taxi, and I pass this church. Is it a significant church in Hampstead, St John's on Downshire Hill?
Yes, it's a very significant church. It's actually Grade 1 listed. The land was bought when they were developing this area in 1813, and it was bought by 3 people, a builder, a solicitor, and a vicar.
Oh, very enterprising.
Very enterprising. I thought we'll build this church for the people who live in this road. It's one of the only churches which has still got the original pews from the 18th century. The clock on the front is from 1823. It's original to the church, built by a clockmaker in Clerkenwell. The church actually continued in use until about 1916, when it was bought by one family that rented it at a peppercorn rent to as long as there was a congregation. They said, don't sell it, just keep it going. And he died in 1938, and it just continued in that way until the 2000s. And then it wasn't until 2003 that the congregation actually bought the church themselves. So the church, as I say, is completely independently run.
Wow, so Hampstead certainly has got some history attached to its churches.